Welcome to Billionaire Romance Audiobooks. Please subscribe to this YouTube channel. It helps more than you know, and is the best way to stay up to date on our latest releases. When you subscribe, you'll also get notified when we release new videos. We also love hearing from our listeners. If you have any suggestions for future audiobooks, please feel free to leave a comment below. Or if you want to say hi, we'd love to hear from you. Thank you for listening, and we hope you have a great day. Subscribe to this channel today and join the Billionaire Romance Audiobooks family.
Masked Indulgence, a Billionaire Holiday Romance Audiobook. Book 2 in the Nightclub Sins series. By Michelle Love. Audio copyright 2023, BFA Publishing. Narrated by Google Play Auto-Narrated Voices. Note: we edited this romance audiobook to comply with the YouTube content guidelines. If you want to listen to the non-edited version and steamy scenes, you can grab a copy from Google Play Books or Kobo.
Chapter 1. Nixon. Halloween night.
A slight chill took over the night air as my driver pulled up in front of the club I'd directed him to. This was where I'd always come to find a bit of relief. The darker side of me often came out around the most sinful of holidays. I'd trekked up to Portland, Oregon, to get away from my life in Los Angeles, California, for a speck of time. I saved that for when I came to the club I'd joined when it first opened a few years back. The Dungeon of Decorum was a place I hadn't often visited, only coming up once or sometimes twice a year. I only liked to play at being in charge. I wasn't the full-time kind. I had never leased a woman or even paid for more than a night's pleasure. It was just a way for me to blow off steam once in a while, nothing serious. When I'd received the invitation to the club's first annual Halloween ball, I got the itch to have some fun and made plans to attend what the invitation assured would be a great time. A red carpet led me from the car I'd hired to the front door of what looked like a shack. On the outside, that's all anyone saw. On the inside, the stairs took you underground to where a massive structure housed a large main room, several smaller, more intimate rooms, a host of private rooms, and even private suites for long-term stays. Walking into the main room, I found a giant banner hanging over the crowd who'd gathered to take part in the eerie festivities. Cloaks covered most of the men's tuxedos, just as mine did. A plain Lone Ranger-style mask hid my identity. The women were the real stars of the night, decked out in all kinds of sensual, sinister attire. I must have looked a bit overwhelmed by the plethora of willing women as a man nudged my shoulder. "See any who are to your liking?" With a nod, I answered his question. "Many are to my liking. This is by far the most sensual Halloween party I've ever been invited to." "Me too," the man said, then chuckled. "But I'm not here to shop for a new woman. I've got me a permanent one now." He reached out to shake my hand. "Dr. Owen Cantrell." As I shook his hand, I recalled hearing that name before, then it struck me. "You're that plastic surgeon to the stars. Or you were before that reality show ended. I believe it was titled Beverly Hills Reconstruction. I'm based out of Los Angeles too. Nixon Slaughter. I own and operate Champlain Services." "I've heard of that," Owen said as he nodded. "It's an environmental agency." To say I was proud of my company was too small a word. That company had taken a lot of time to build and to make a name for itself. After years of hard work, I'd accomplished more than I had ever dreamed. We worked worldwide, and the best part was that we were helping the planet and future generations. Shoving my hands into my pockets, I rocked on my feet, pride overflowing inside of me. "So you've heard of my little endeavor?" "Who hasn't?" he asked with a grin. "I also read something in the LA Times about you and a couple of other guys building some new club downtown. An exclusive one, much like the select few nightclubs in Las Vegas. When do you suppose that'll be opening?" "We're hoping to have it open for a New Year's Eve bash. That's the target date for the grand opening." I pulled a business card out of the chest pocket of my jacket and handed it to Owen. Here's my number. Give me a call and I'll set you and a date up for that, on the house. He pocketed the card and clapped me on the back. Cool. We'll be there. Thanks, man. He pulled out a card of his own and gave it to me. And if you know of anyone who needs my services, you give them my number. And let them know if they say you referred them, they'll get a 10% discount. I put away his card as I said, "Will do, partner." A woman with long silky black hair, wearing a barely there teddy and a giant mask with peacock feathers, came to Owen's side. He put his arm around her, pulling her close to his side. "Allow me to introduce you to the woman who'll be my date at your grand opening. This is Petra, my wife." She extended a long, slender hand and I took it, delivering a kiss to the top of it. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Petra. I'm Nixon Slaughter. I look forward to seeing you both at my nightclub on New Year's Eve. You'll be my honored guests." "Oh," she looked at her husband. "That club, I read about it." Her dark eyes turned to mine. "Have you come up with a name for it yet? Last I read, you and your partners hadn't." Shaking my head, I shoved my hands back into my pockets. "No, we're at an impasse. But we'll come up with something soon. Just as soon as we can figure out how to get Gannon Forrester to stop shooting down all of our ideas." Petra's eyes lit up as she said, "How about club exclusive? You know, because it's catering to an exclusive branch of society, the ultra-wealthy. I'll run it by my partners." Our attention was then taken by someone who'd gotten to the mic on the main stage. "Happy Halloween, everybody," the master of ceremonies called out. Thunderous applause boomed throughout the large room. Owen gave me a nod, and he and his wife moved forward to get closer to the stage. I stood back, watching the crowd move in. I wasn't too keen on being in the midst of a crowd. I like to be near an exit most times. It was an odd little quirk of mine. Getting trampled in a panicked frenzy was a bit of a phobia I had. Thankfully, staying on the fringes of any crowd kept me sane. A waiter came by with a tray of assorted cocktails. I picked up a clear drink that had some cherries floating in it. When I took a little taste, I found it was minty and fresh. Looking back at the stage, I found 4 people lining up on it. 1 man and 3 women, all wearing red cloaks, were getting into position. Chains fell from the rafters, and more men came onto the stage to string the women up. Playing with ropes and chains wasn't a thing I'd ever done. Not that I wouldn't like to someday, but I just didn't have the know-how to put all that stuff up in a space. And I couldn't have a room at home, the way a lot of men did. My parents visited from their home in Texas and stayed with me about 3 or 4 times a year. They'd usually stay for a week each time, and Mom was a nosy little woman. I'd never get away with having a red room of pain in my place. Not to mention, Malibu beach houses weren't quite the place to practice things that had women screaming. The cops would be called, that was a given. So I was left with dabbling with my little fetish in another place. A few people knew my sinister secret. My partners and my best friend Shanna. My partners thought it was badass. Shanna thought it was freakish and that I'd get over it one day and grow the hell up. Shanna and I had been friends back in our tiny hometown of Pettis, Texas. When I came out to LA, she got mad at me for leaving her all alone in the boring town. After I'd established myself, I yielded to her pleas and allowed her to come out and live at my place until she was able to stand on her own 2 feet. A thing she did pretty rapidly. It was when she was living with me that she found out about my little secret. I'd brought a woman home with me one night during the first week Shanna was there. I'd forgotten she was there, to be honest. Shanna knocked on the bedroom door and yelled at me to come out and talk to her. Which I did, reluctantly sending the woman home as Shanna berated me for my unforgivable behavior. She told me 50 Shades sucked and anyone who followed such a mindless plot was a goddamned fool, a thing she knew I wasn't. I was expecting another berating and a long sermon to come from her when I returned home from this trip. I'd managed to duck out of town before she could catch me and try to stop me from going to Portland, knowing what I did whenever I traveled there. "Excuse me, please," came a soft voice as a woman touched my arm to get me to take a step to one side, allowing her to move into the crowd. She only made it a few steps in front of me, before the outer wall of people stopped her forward progression. Even from behind, she was alluring. Long legs covered in torn black fishnet stockings ended in a pair of red heels. A black bodice clung to her curves, her round back gave way to a dip in her back, displayed by a panel of see-through black lace splitting the silky material right down the middle. She wore her hair in a long dark braid that she had pulled over her left shoulder. When she turned around, clearly annoyed that she couldn't see anything from where she was, her blue eyes met mine. Lifting my drink to her, I said, "Hey. Hey. Really? How lame am I?"
Chapter 2. Katana.
Although the night had started out badly, I found myself looking into the most gorgeous set of deep green eyes I'd ever seen. The mask he wore did little to hide the fact that the tall, muscular man was handsome. "Hey," he said to me as he raised his glass. I needed a drink desperately. A thing he must have noticed as my eyes moved from his gaze to his almost full glass. Just then, a waiter walked behind him, and he stopped the guy, grabbing me a drink off the full tray. Handing me a dark drink with a lime wedge hanging on the rim of the clear highball glass, he smiled at me. "Would you care for a drink?" "I'm dying for one, actually." I took the drink from him and struggled to be somewhat classy, taking a dainty sip instead of downing it the way I wanted to. The last week had been hellish. I hadn't paid attention to my schedule and had set up not 2 or 3 deadlines for myself, but 10 of them. As a freelance book cover designer, I was self-employed, and that meant I was my own boss, a thing that was new to me. Not experienced in management, things had gotten out of hand. I'd get it down eventually, I knew I would, but the week had taken its toll on me. One would think going to a club for a Halloween party would be the last place an overworked woman would want to go. But being able to give my whole self over to someone else was always a relief. So I took the invite sent to me by my friend Bliss. We'd met long ago, when I was just a kid sent to an orphanage after my mother disappeared. Bliss and I were a lot alike. We were both quiet and kept to ourselves. We'd written to one another when I was sent to live with an elderly couple in foster care, and she stayed at the orphanage. We kept in contact just so we both knew there was at least one person in the world who knew we existed. Bliss had met the man she'd eventually married at this club, and she had encouraged me to check it out by coming to their first annual Halloween ball. She knew I had little experience in the world, but assured me that didn't matter. I could just watch things this first time. If someone did ask me to do anything, she told me to let them know about my inexperience. I'd hoped she and her husband, Troy, would be at the club for the big bash, but he didn't want to bring her back to the place for some reason. I thought it was odd that he wouldn't want to come back to a place that had brought them together. "Do you come here often?" the hunky man asked me, shaking me from my thoughts. Only then did I realize I hadn't even said thank you. "Oh geez." I grimaced and felt the plastic of my mask gouge into my cheeks. "I'm sorry. It's been a hell of a week. First, let me say thanks for grabbing me a drink. I need copious amounts of alcohol to rid my mind of all the clutter that's been burning through it for over a week. And second, let me answer your question. No, I don't come here often. This is my first time." When his lips pulled up into one of the best smiles I'd ever seen, I couldn't help but notice his perfect teeth. "First time, huh? Any experience with this type of thing?" My body tensed. I wasn't used to talking about where I'd gotten my experience, limited as it was. Well, I had this boyfriend when I was 19. He liked to spank me. And that turned into a little more, a little bondage. I hesitated to tell him the rest, as our little playtime hadn't ended well. I didn't want him to think I was scared by what had happened. But Bliss had urged me to be truthful with any man I might consider doing anything with, so I went on. In the end, the club thing turned into just plain physical abuse, coupled with mental abuse. It ended when he went to jail for beating the hell out of me, and leaving me with a broken arm and jaw. Damn. His one-word answer had me looking down. I knew he felt sorry for me, and probably thought of me as damaged goods. His fingers touched my chin, pulling my face up. I saw the concern in his green eyes. Are you okay now? I nodded. That was a few years ago. I got over it, I told him. And I had, for the most part. The only remnant from that horrible time in my life was a nightmare sneaking up on me every now and then, telling me I still had a little damage left over from the brute. You can call me Mr. S. What should I call you? He shifted his weight as he looked me over. Katana, I said, as I hadn't thought of an alternate name for myself. Bliss hadn't told me about doing that. Katana Reeves. Nice to meet you, Katana Reeves. He jerked his head to one side. I'm not into crowds. You want to join me in one of the smaller rooms? We can watch a scene together. After a nod, he took me by the hand and off we went, leaving the large room behind us. A step behind him, I took the opportunity to chug my drink while he couldn't see me. I needed to take the edge off, and quickly. As he pushed open a door, I heard horrible groans and saw a woman all tied up and bent over some kind of a table. Hushed whispers were heard as a handful of people watched what seemed to be a brutal scene. Out of the corner of my eye, I spotted a bar and pulled at my hand to get Mr. S to let me go. He stopped and turned to look at me, seeing the empty glass in my hand. He smiled at me, and we headed to the bar first. What would you like, Katana? Bourbon and Coke, please. I already felt like he was taking care of me, and it felt awesome, exactly what I needed after my hectic week. A double shot of Michter's Celebration and Coke for the lady and some of the same for me, straight on the rocks. He set his half-full glass on the bar, and I placed my empty one next to his. His dark green eyes moved to my lips. I like that black lipstick you've got on. Shame it's going to get all messed up later. His confident statement took me by surprise, and all I could do was stare at the hot man who seemed to be made of muscles. A shiver ran through me as our drinks were put in front of us. He took mine, placing it in my hand. Then he grabbed his drink in one hand, my hand with the other, and took me to a little table for two at the back of the room. I gulped as I heard the loud smacking sound of leather meeting flesh, and the yell of pain that followed. My eyes closed as I thought about what I was getting myself into. His arm moved over my shoulder, and he drew me in close. His lips grazed my ear as he said softly, "You're perfectly safe with me, Katana. No reason to worry at all. Just sit back and relax. Enjoy the show, then perhaps you'll think about what you and I can come up with together. I promise you won't feel abused while in my hands." The way he spoke, the look in his eyes, the way he touched me, it all made me feel at ease. He was a perfect stranger, yet I felt drawn to him in a way I'd never felt with any other man. Another smacking sound had me looking at the couple on the small stage. Sagging in the ropes, the woman seemed beaten down. My heart ached as I knew how that felt. In more ways than one. Lyle Strickland wasn't the first person to beat the hell out of me and leave me wishing for death to take the pain away. But he'd sure as hell be the last. When the woman's man untied her, he carried her wilted body to a bed and laid her down with gentleness. He got up to leave her and her arms went out to him. "Please, sir." "Now you want me?" her dom asked her. "I thought you wanted that other man." "Only you, sir." "I'm only meant for you. Please take me. I am yours." Since we didn't get to see most of the show, I figured she must have been cheating and had gotten caught. My eyes cut to Mr. S's, finding him none too pleased with the scene. A hard line had his lips clamped shut. He and I both seemed out of place in the club. The look on his face was different from the look most of the other men who watched the show had. He looked disgusted while most of the others looked enticed. I had to admit, that particular scene wasn't a thing I liked either. If someone cheated on you, you let their sorry butt go. No need to whip them into loving you. As if that could even happen in real life. It came as no shock to me when he leaned in close once more. "I've got a few toys at my hotel. What do you say we ditch this place and head over there?" My brain interjected. Hello Katana. You don't even know this man's real name, or one damn thing about him, except he's into the things they do at the private club." Cocking one brow, I dared to ask, Do you think you could give me some identification before I take you up on that offer?" Without missing a beat, he pulled out his wallet and showed me his California driver's license. "I'm Nixon Slaughter, owner of Champlain Services in Los Angeles." He went one step further and took a business card out of his wallet, slipping it into my hand before putting his wallet away. "That's my number. Feel better about being alone with me now, Katana Reeves?" With a nod, I agreed to what he wanted. "I'm in your hands now, Mr. S. I think for tonight I'd like to be called Master, my little minx." He got up, took my hand, and away we went.
Chapter 3. Nixon.
Heading into the lobby of the Heathman Hotel, Katana and I got a few stares as we strolled in. She'd donned a red cloak to cover her little naughty negligee, but we'd kept the masks on. It felt more fun that way. In the elevator, we rode up to my room with two other couples. They seemed to sense we were up to no good and stayed on the far side, away from us. When we got out, the others stayed inside, and we both laughed as we walked down the hallway. Putting my arm around her shoulders, I gave her a little squeeze. Think we intimidated them? Seems like we did. Katana smiled, and it made my heart beat faster. Her smile was amazing. So bright, brilliant, and genuine. I guess they thought they'd ended up in an elevator with a couple of freaks. Didn't they? I asked as I chuckled and pulled out the keycard to open the door to my hotel room. I let her go in first, and she looked around at the glamorous room. I've lived in Portland for a long time now and have never been inside this place. It's like a Portland treasure. It is. This hotel is where I always stay when I come to town. I closed the door, locking it behind us. She turned around at the sound and looked at the door. "Just so you know, I've never done this." "I thought you said you had, but it turned into a bad thing." Was she getting cold feet? I hadn't even done anything to her yet. She pulled off the cloak and draped it over the back of the chair in front of the small desk. "I mean, I haven't gone to bed with a man I've just met." Stepping out of my shoes, I wondered what she was thinking about all of this. She seemed calm, but she had just come into a hotel room with a stranger. She and I had discussed nothing on the way in. Nor had I tested the waters on anything yet. For my part, I felt very unlike myself, and I had no idea why she would have this effect on me. But I was going to get past that for sure. Katana had a beauty about her that intrigued me. She wasn't able to hold eye contact long at all. And when we were alone in the back of the car on the way to the hotel, she hadn't spoken unless I'd said something. It was almost as if I was a virgin teen again with no real clue as to what to do, and Katana seemed to be having the same reaction to me. I found myself stumbling over my words as I tried to answer her question. "I am well, let's see. I don't get off on hitting, if that's what you're asking me. And I'd like to make love, if that's okay with you." She looked down, her eyes glued to the floor. "Okay. It's actually been a long time since I've done anything." "How long's a long time, Katana?" I took my jacket off and went to hang it up. "A year or so." I dropped the jacket on the floor and turned around. "Are you shitting me?" She shook her head, and my heart went out to the young woman. "About a year and a half, actually." She looked up and looked around the room, her eyes landing on the mini-fridge. "I don't suppose you have any alcohol in there?" I unbuttoned my shirt, now completely understanding her need for alcohol. The poor thing was pent up. I could fix that. "No need. I know how to quench your thirst. On the bed on your back." One of the rules of the club is that everyone is screened for diseases, and the females are in charge of the birth control. Have you taken care of all that, minx? "I have, master." I watched as her hands moved into fists on top of the bedspread. She was getting tense in anticipation of what I was about to do. "You have nothing to fear. Our safe word is red. Say yellow if you're beginning to get uncomfortable. Got it?" I blew on her again. "Got it, master." She began to tremble, and I knew she was letting her mind get ahead of her, worrying about what she'd gotten into. Little did she know she had a pretty great guy who'd make sure she got what she'd gone into the dungeon looking for. Not to worry though, I'll have something sent up for you in the morning. I want you all night long. She tensed up even more but said nothing. I smiled as it thrilled me to know she trusted me so much, even when she had absolutely no reason to at this point. Lips that hadn't seen any action in way too long. I knew right then that it would be hard to keep myself under control with her. But I liked a challenge, so I thought only of pleasing her and ignored my straining member. He'd get what he craved soon enough, and plenty of it. I lost control for a bit. She tasted like sin wrapped in heaven. I went to work on her, rolling it between my lips. I knew I'd picked one ripe female for the night. I'd make this a night she'd remember for a very long time. She looked gorgeous, her eyes closed. The mask was still on her face, hiding her a bit from me. For one moment, I thought about taking the masks off. But I shook my head. The masks lent anonymity to what we were doing. That was part of the thrill, having someone you didn't have all the information about and not caring. Getting off the bed, I saw her gorgeous blue eyes open, and she watched me as I went to get some things. Thank you, Master. I really needed that. You were right. I didn't need any alcohol to get into this. You're very good at what you do. Glad you liked it. She sat up and ran her hands over her heaving chest. I haven't been bound in a long time. I've never allowed that after what happened to me. My face must have shown my disappointment because she quickly added, I trust you, Master. I'm in your capable hands and will do anything you want to. She laid back down. She really would be a treat.
Chapter 4. Katana.
The only words I could use to describe Nixon's body were totally ripped. The bulge in his tight black underwear left nothing to the imagination. The last click I heard left me pinned to the bed in a spread-eagled position. My negligee was still intact, but I knew that wouldn't be the case for long, as he headed back to me with a knife in his hand. The light glistened off the long blade. My heart sprang into action with the fear the object invoked. I gulped, closing my eyes as I felt the cold blade against my skin. Soft ripping sounds met my ears as he cut away the flimsy material that barely hid my body from his gorgeous green eyes. Once he had cut away everything, I felt the tip of the knife as he moved it over me. I had no idea knife play could be so enticing. Whenever I'd thought about it before, I thought I'd be much too afraid to enjoy it at all. How wrong I'd been. The knife went down my side, and Nixon's mouth came to replace the blade at my chest. He pulled it with his teeth, and a slight pain jolted through me in the best possible way. Then he soothed it with some gentle licks before biting down, making me yelp. His laugh was deep and sinister. He enjoyed making me cry out in pain. The blade moved up and down my side, igniting both chills and heat inside of me. It would be so easy for him to rip me open with that long, sharp knife, yet he wasn't going to do that. Something inside me told me that. Nixon pulled the knife over my stomach, and he moved the edge up until I felt the sharpness at the base of my chest. One swift movement and I'd lose it. I stopped breathing. Shit, have I handed myself over to a murderer? Sure, he'd given me his card with his name and number on it, but what would that matter if I was dead? The safe word, red, ruminated inside my brain, but before I could say it the knife was gone and his hot mouth was on my chest. Gosh! I cried out with the sensation. My entire body pulsed with a very different peak than I'd ever experienced. Nixon's voice came softly near my ear. Hush now. We've only just begun. My entire body shook. We'd only just begun. I had already ridden 2 monstrous waves, and we'd only just begun. Did I have the stamina to make it through the night? I watched him walk away from me, his fine butt moving with each step. Yeah, I can find the stamina to make it through the night with him. My arms longed to wrap around his muscular body, and without conscious thought I pulled to test the cuffs holding them. My legs pulled too, wanting to hold him to me. He stopped and spun around. His eyes were hard and cold all of a sudden. Are you telling your master what to do? That's grounds for punishment, surely you know that. I didn't know that. I mean, I did, but I didn't. I thought I'd phrased it in such a way that it didn't come off as telling him what to do, but I must have been wrong. He went to his suitcase. Are you going to tell your master what to do anymore? I gauged how my body reacted and found it was on fire. And not in a bad way. My hesitation to answer him had me getting 3 more, and I felt my body creaming with desire. I wanted more. I kept my mouth shut, and he gave me 3 more before asking, "Do you like to be punished?" "Yes," I whimpered. "More, please." And there you go again. He gave me 3 more smacks, then reached under me. "Ah, I see why you're being so disobedient now." Insane as it might sound, I was getting off to that in a huge way. Tears flowed from my eyes like rivers as my body let everything go. The tension I had been carrying around for weeks, maybe even months or years, seemed to turn to water inside me and rushed out of my body through my eyes. Before I knew what was happening, he'd moved me to lie on my back and pulled me to the edge of the bed. The sounds coming from deep in his throat made me think he'd never tasted anything he'd ever enjoyed so much. It stirred something inside of me. Why can this only last one night? I shook my head at that thought and wiped my eyes. I couldn't go thinking about the future. Who knew, he might come back for more now and then. When he'd gotten his fill, he stood up. We just stared at each other, his arms braced on either side of my head. I had no idea what he was thinking. But I had my own thoughts to focus on. This can't be real.
Chapter 5. Nixon.
Our time together passed much too quickly. Katana and I did everything I could think of, and not once did she seem the least bit apprehensive about anything I did to her. For a couple of complete strangers, we connected in a way that felt as if we'd known one another forever. We'd only had a couple of hours of sleep before the driver I'd hired was expected to arrive to take me to the airport, where I'd hop on the company jet back to LA. I had work to get to. When I rolled over to wake her, I saw her mask had come off as she slept. Mine had stayed on, but I pulled it off as I gazed at her. Katana's face was just as gorgeous as I'd thought it would be. I'd pulled her dark hair out of the braid at one point during our night, and the long strands were everywhere. She looked like an angel as she slept, her lips swollen from all the kissing we'd done. I couldn't stop the smile that took over my mouth. She looked too perfect. "Hi." "Hi," she replied with a stretch. Then her hand came up to caress my cheek. "You're even more handsome without the mask." "And you're even more beautiful without yours," I kissed her cheek. "Did you sleep well?" Before she could answer, I pulled her into my arms, holding her in a way I rarely did with anyone, especially not anyone I'd done this sort of thing with. She cuddled into my chest. "You wore me out completely. I slept like a baby. Not even a dream made it through." With a chuckle I agreed. "We did seem to give it our all, didn't we?" "I should think so. It'll tide me over for quite some time," she said, then rolled off me and got out of bed, heading to the bathroom. I watched her round ass, admiring the dimple at the top of each cheek as she left the room. And I caught myself sighing. "What have you done to me, you little vixen?" The lovemaking had been better than any I could recall. She felt better in my arms and underneath me than anyone ever had. But this was a one-time thing. Sure, I could probably call her up now and then and see if she'd like to have another one-nighter, but that wasn't really how I liked to do things. I preferred to hit it and quit it. It kept things uncomplicated, and that was my goal. I heard the shower running and decided now was the time to call the front desk and have something sent up for her to wear home. Rhoda speaking. "How may I help you, Mr. Slaughter?" "I need some clothes sent up in size 2. I'd checked the tag on her naughty nightie to get her size. She had red heels, so I ordered something that would match them. Can you send up a black dress? Something nice and expensive. Matching underwear. I had to guess on the size of that. And if you find a nice necklace that would accent it, please add that on. Money isn't a concern. I want the best of everything. And please have it delivered to my room as quickly as you can. Yes, sir. Give me half an hour, and I'll have it sent right up. I hung up the hotel phone and went to the closet to retrieve my clothes for the trip back home. My cell rang, and I went back to get it, seeing it wasn't a number I had in my contacts. Hello? Hey, is this Nixon? A man asked me. Yes. And this is? I looked in the mirror at my stubbled cheeks. Maybe I'll grow my beard out, I thought to myself. A little something to remind me of last night. This is Owen Cantrell. You gave me your card last night. I was just calling to check on you. I lost track of you last night and wanted to be sure you made it out safely. Yeah, I made it out all right. I had no idea why he'd be worried about something like that. He soon told me why. That was some scene, huh? I don't think I've ever been more afraid in my entire life. Of what? I asked as I was clearly in the dark. The explosions, of course, he enlightened me. Explosions? Yeah, he went on. Wait, did you leave before that happened? I did. I walked back to the bed and sat down, feeling a little lightheaded. So there were explosions. Was anyone hurt or worse? Thankfully, no one was hurt. We all managed to make it out of there somehow. He stopped and I heard him make a smacking sound. I'm sorry. I just had to give my wife a kiss. It was like we almost lost each other last night. It was awful. The dungeon of decorum seems like it's probably at an end. It was completely destroyed. I can't believe it, I mumbled. What time did this happen? Hell, I can't even begin to tell you that. I couldn't think straight until a little while ago. I was definitely suffering from a bit of shock. I just keep thinking how close my wife and I came to meeting our maker. Wow. Looks like I dodged a bullet. Glad I found someone and we left early. And I was glad of that for a couple other reasons too. Well, you and I need to hang out a bit when we get back to Los Angeles. I'd like to see you sometime before New Year's Eve. Catch you later, Nixon, he said, then hung up. My eyes flew to the bathroom door, where Katana was coming out. She'd wrapped her perfect body in a fluffy pink towel. Did I hear you talking to someone? Yeah, I said as I put my cell down on the nightstand. Seems we'll never be going back to that club again. Her dark brows rose. And why might that be? It's destroyed. Some explosions occurred. I don't know the full story. One of my buddies from the club just called to ask if I had made it out okay. I got up and walked straight to her, gathering her into my arms, still naked as the day I was born. I'm so glad I got you out of there before anything happened, Katana. Gosh, Nix. How lucky are we? She asked, and I felt a chill run through her as her body shook a bit. She'd called me Nix. My mother called me that. No one else ever had. I had a reputation that usually stopped anything like that. But I loved the way it sounded, coming out of her mouth. Pulling back, I didn't let her go as I looked at her with a smile on my face. Nix, huh? Okay, I'll give you that one. But does that mean I get to call you Cat? With a sigh, she gave me a weak smile. I don't know if we'll be doing any more calling each other anything. When we leave here, this is over. No strings. I recall how this all works. We had one hot night and there'll be nothing more. I know the rules. I'm not going to bother you. I'd kind of like her to bother me. I nodded, knowing she had had to sign something at the club that held her to that promise. But it didn't stop me from feeling a bit bad about it. I genuinely liked the woman. You do have my number if you really need me. Not that I think you would, but if you do, you have it. I won't use it. She turned her head. That's not what either of us went to that club for, right? One hot night of crazy passion is what we went there for, and we got that. She looked back at me, and I saw something shimmer in the backs of her blue eyes. Her hands moved up my arms, reaching up to cradle my face. I'll keep the memory of last night locked away in my mind forever, Nixon Slaughter. It's my most cherished one so far. She kissed my lips softly. Now it was my turn to feel the chill, and my body quaked for a moment. I tightened my hold on her, pulling her closer to me, and kissing her back in a way I'd never done with another one-night stand woman. A knock on the door interrupted what was sure to turn into another escapade. My brain was thankful, my shaft was not. That would be your clothes. Put them on while I shower. Don't you dare leave. I'll have the driver I hired take you home after he takes me to the airport. I'd get you home first, but I've got to go into the office once I get back home. Most days are work days for me. Okay, she said with a smile. That's very sweet of you. Sweet? Was I being sweet? I let her go and walked away, knowing I wasn't being myself with her. I was anything but sweet. Back in LA, I was known for my aloofness, and for never dating anyone for more than a couple weeks. Most of the time, business occupied my mind. I'd been accused of being neglectful by my dates, answering calls at dinner, getting up and walking away, leaving my dates alone with no explanation as to why. As I showered, I tried to think about business to get my head back in working order, but Katana kept popping into my mind with memories of her sweet smile or her hot kiss. I had to hurry up and get Katana home and away from me. Her hooks seemed to be sinking into me, and I couldn't have that at all.
Chapter 6. Katana.
Sitting down at my computer to get to work on a new book cover, I still wore the gorgeous dress Nix bought me. We'd parted ways only a couple of hours before, and his goodbye kiss still tingled on my lips. I stared blankly at the computer screen. My mind couldn't focus on anything other than the events of last night. When my cell rang, I jumped and looked at it, hoping it might be him. But it couldn't be him. He didn't have my number. I had his, though I'd never call it. Bliss's name lit up my phone, and I answered the call. Hi Bliss. How's it going? You sound way too calm, Katana. Didn't you go to the club last night? She asked. I did, and I left it only a short time after I arrived, as the most handsome man picked me before I had a chance to see much of the club you've told me so much about. I got up and walked to the window to look outside as I conjured up the memory of the first time I'd laid eyes on Nix. Bliss's voice pulled me out of my reverie before I could really start daydreaming about the man. So you weren't in the club when all the chaos ensued then? Oh, that. No. No, he and I left very early, thank God. Someone from the club called him and told him about it. Seems we dodged a bullet there. That you did. She seemed to be a lot calmer than before. Okay, so this man, tell me all about him and what you guys did. I leaned my shoulder against the window pane and sighed. He was the best lover I've ever had. Not that I've had that many. Okay, I've had two, and it's been over a year since I've done anything. You haven't even played with your cell? She interrupted me. That's personal. I laughed. But no, not even that. Maybe it seemed so intense and hugely satisfying because of that, I don't know. But it was electric, and I can't stop thinking about it. So that's what it would be like if I had a long-term thing with a man? I asked, as the idea did things to my insides that made me quiver. This last night, have you thinking about finding yourself a full-time man, Katana? She asked, with a hint of humor in her voice. Well, not just any man would do. But my guy wasn't into anything that lasts longer than one night. He doesn't even live in this city. I moved away from the window and went to sit back down. So was he able to get all that pent-up stress out of you? I know you had one hell of a crazy schedule last week, you were going insane. She laughed again. I hope he got that off your back. All the stress had melted away, and it had to be because of him. Oh yeah, he got rid of all that. Much better than the masseuse my friend recommended. She giggled knowingly. I bet. Running my hand through my hair, I released the scent of the hotel shampoo, and an image of Nixon flashed in my head. I had to think about something else. So how's the hubby, Bliss? Is Troy doing okay? He's doing well. "We're about to take the kids out to window shop for Christmas presents," she told me. "We do that every year so they can let us know all the things they want, and then we surprise them with a few of them on Christmas. It's a fun tradition we've had for a few years." "Christmas already?" I had to ask. "It's barely the day after Halloween." "Yeah, I know. This is the traditional day that we do this thing. That way, we have lots of time to make sure we get them what they really want. I always have my Christmas shopping done before Thanksgiving. Because the day after Thanksgiving, we set up the Christmas tree, and I have presents ready to go right away. We're big on the holidays in this family." "I'm glad you found yourself a big family to live and love with. You deserve it all, Bliss," I gushed. She'd been the best person I'd ever met while in the foster care system. "Ah, thanks, Katana. You know you deserve happiness too." She paused, and I could tell her wheels were spinning. "I worry about you sometimes. You stay alone too much, holed up in your little apartment in Portland making those book covers. I know you're making good money and all, but it takes away from your social life. You really need to get out more. Make a habit of it. Stop working at 5 or 6, get yourself dolled up and go out instead of working all night." I don't know. The thought of going out, and maybe ending up in bed with another guy, just hit me the wrong way all of a sudden. I knew I didn't belong to Nixon, but there was something that told me I'd be disappointed if I went to bed with another man. Plus, I couldn't think about anyone else at that moment, still overwhelmed by our amazing night together. I'm not into clubbing. The only reason I registered with the Dungeon of Decorum is because of the safety net it provided me. No abuse is tolerated, and I had a number to call if that occurred. "Yeah, I know that bastard did a number on you back then. Do you know if he's still in jail or not?" she asked with concern etching her voice. I didn't know a thing about the man who'd left permanent scars on my body, brain, and heart. I don't know anything about him. It's been 4 years since I left Flagstaff. As far as I know, he doesn't have a clue where I moved. Lyle Strickland is a man I try hard not to think about. I paused for a moment, reflecting on the relationship I'd had 2 years after I left Lyle, after I'd moved to Portland. I know he's the main reason it didn't work out with Jimmy, too. I just never trusted him the entire 6 months we were together. I know how hard it is to find that trust again. I've had my fair share of torture in the past. Not that I want to get into any of that. That's all better off left alone. Well, I better get going. I can hear the kids putting up a fuss already. Love you, Katana. I love you too, Bliss. I'll call you again soon. Have fun. Bye. I ended the call and leaned my head back, thinking about my past. When Lyle had come on to me just after I turned 19, I'd thought I had hit the jackpot. He was older, 25, and so dominant. I suppose I liked that sort of thing, because I'd never had anyone care that much about me. I took it as a sign that he really loved me. Turned out, he really loved controlling my every move, and then he really loved beating the shit out of me. My bruises and broken bones healed, but my heart and soul were left in rough shape. Even if Nixon Slaughter were knocking down my door trying to date me, I wasn't in any shape to be the woman for him. Still having my moments of being an emotional wreck at times proved I wasn't ready to be anyone's girl. Poor Jimmy had got the shit end of the stick when he got with me. As a couple of years had passed since the horror show with Lyle, I'd thought I was over everything. Jimmy was anything but dominating. Poor guy was a pushover. I suppose that's why things ended so fast between us. I pushed him to lord over me, but that wasn't for him. He couldn't do it. I knew I'd had a rough life. I knew I had mental issues with that. Was it so wrong of me to need a man who would take control and treat me like I was his? It didn't seem that modern women wanted what I wanted. Not most of them, anyway. I wanted that firm hand. I wanted that rough touch. Craved it. And I thought I'd found that with Lyle. But what I found instead was that you couldn't trust every man. And I couldn't be happy with a man who wasn't at least somewhat dominating, either. I felt stuck in a terribly deep rut. The thing I wanted the most was the thing that had hurt me so much in the past and made me wary of relationships. And I had no idea what I'd ever do to remedy that. Being alone wasn't the answer either. Getting up, I went back to my desk and tapped on the computer to bring up pictures of hot muscular men so I could pick one for the next book cover I'd be making. One by one, I blew them all off as none compared to Nixon. His tight abs, his broad chest with massive pecs, his hulking biceps, no one compared to him. How in the hell would I ever get him out of my mind? Would time eventually rid me of that perfect memory? Would I even want it to? It had one perfect night. The best night of my entire life. Why would I want to forget about it? Maybe because it already haunted me. Maybe because I already knew no other man could come close to comparing to Nixon slaughter. I was doomed.
Chapter 7. Nixon.
Fall weather made the drive to work a pleasure. I didn't even mind the hour I had to sit in traffic at the airport. It gave me time to think about my night with Katana, after all. It had only been a little while since I'd left her, but I had to admit I found myself missing her a little too often. She had my number, and I kept wishing she'd call. Maybe she'd ask me to come down and play for the weekend or something. But the phone never rang. When traffic began rolling again, I made it all the way to my office building. Champlain Services, located inside the Century Plaza Towers on Century Park East, was my home away from home. With 6 offices on the top floor, we had a great view of the city. When I came into the reception area, I saw my admin assistant, Blake, busy on the phone. I gave him a wave and headed to my office. He paused in the middle of his conversation to call out to me, "Don't forget you have the Skype meeting this morning, boss." Thanks. I had forgotten about the meeting, but I wasn't behind schedule, even with the hour lost in traffic. Getting into my office, I turned on the computer monitor on the wall and got ready for the meeting with my partners in the nightclub endeavor. The call came in from Gannon Forrester's office, and I clicked the accept button and found his adorable little secretary looking at me from the conference room in his office. "Good morning, Mr. Slaughter. It's nice to see you." "You too, Janine. Is Gannon there?" I pulled up my most comfortable chair and settled in for the meeting. "Yes, sir. And I'll be adding Mr. Harlow to this meeting in just one moment." "Sit tight," she said with a smile, then pushed her thick-framed glasses up her nose a bit. After a minute, August Harlow's face filled half the screen. "Hey, ugly," I joked with him. "Hey, precious," he said with a chuckle. "How's life treating ya? You weren't in town yesterday. Where might you have been?" "Oh, nowhere special. Did you miss me?" I winked at him. "Of course, my little buttercup. Halloween was nothing without you there," he kidded with me. "But seriously, you missed one hell of a good time. Gannon and I had some fun with some nurses. At least they were dressed as nurses. There were 3 of them and only 2 of us, and one nearly got left out until I decided I could take on 2 at a time." "What a hero," I said as I clapped. "Always helping out the citizens of our fair country, August." Retired from the Marines at only 30, August had seen some pretty grim shit that he didn't like to talk about. "I do what I can. Being retired, I can only help stateside. I like to keep up the morale over here." He laughed again, then Gannon's face filled the other side of my screen. Gannon's smile was bright as always as he greeted us, "Morning, gentlemen." And I do use that term lightly. August took the lead, as usual. "So the time has come for us to put our bickering behind us and agree on a name for this nightclub. We'd argued over this one thing for far too long. Seemed it was time to shit or get off the pot. So I gave them my idea one more time. Let the record show, I like the name Club X. I knew it would be Gannon who had something to say about that. And I've told you before, that name is much too common. August pointed out one major problem to Gannon. "Yes, but Gannon, you have yet to come up with a single name. You've had no problem shooting down all the ones we've come up with, though. So I am throwing you into the middle of this debate and challenging you to come up with a name on the fly. You have 1 minute. Giving Gannon 1 minute to do anything was a stretch. He was a thinker, not a shoot-from-the-hip kind of guy. What? He looked back and forth at August and me with a look of panic on his face. I'm not that creative. You guys are. I looked at my watch, then back at Gannon. You're wasting time, Gannon. August looked at his watch too. The time is ticking away. 30 seconds, Gannon, or we're sticking with Club X. No. Wait, give me 1 more minute. I'm terrible under pressure. Gannon pinched the bridge of his nose, looking as if he had to use all of his concentration to get a name to come to his business brain. August wasn't messing around and wasn't going to give him any more time. Nope, no extra time. And we're coming in on 10-9. I sat back, pretty sure the club would get the moniker I'd come up with. Gannon's eyes popped open wide, and he looked as if a light bulb had just gone off inside his head. Swank? I had to smile. I liked the name immediately. August nodded, and he also wore a broad smile. Swank? I like it. I chuckled. Me too. Swank it is then. I looked at August. Seems we've had a productive meeting, August. Time to get back to our real jobs. Catch you guys later in the week. Nixon out. I clicked off the screen and got up to get to my real job. There were a couple of things I needed to get to that day, and one of them looked to be lunch with my best friend, Shanna. Not business, but a necessary meeting nonetheless, as it had been over a week since we'd talked. Shanna and I had met in kindergarten at our school in the tiny South Texas town of Pettis. She and I used to walk to school together, as her family lived a few houses down from mine. Our relationship had always been like a brother-sister type thing, with no romance involved. When I'd come out to California to go to Berkeley, she'd stayed home and gone to the community college there, the only thing she and her parents could afford. Shanna gained an associate's degree but never got past that. Instead, she got her grandmother to teach her how to sew, and she became quite good at it. She begged me to let her stay with me in LA, and soon after her arrival, she secured herself an interview at Paramount Studios, landing a job as a costume designer. Her stay with me was short-lived, as she was able to save enough money to move into her own apartment within a month. But she and I made a pact that we'd never brush each other off or put the other to the side. She was the only family I had out here, and vice versa, even if we weren't exactly family. So whenever I saw lunch or dinner with Shanna in my schedule, I made sure I didn't miss any of them. When lunchtime came, I met her at Providence to enjoy some seafood. She met me at the door, and I hugged her. There he is. I made it. Today has been one hell of a day. I took her hand, leading her inside. In no time at all they had us seated, and our appetizer of oysters on the half shell was brought to us, along with some white wine. She rocked back in her seat as she swallowed one of the oysters, then looked at me. So, you disappeared on me. I thought you and I might go trick-or-treating last night, just like we did in the old days. I'd dress up as a witch, and you'd throw a sheet over your head and cut out a couple of holes for your eyes. Yeah, I did do a little dressing up. I wore a mask anyway. I sipped my wine, then ate an oyster as she looked at me with narrowed eyes. A mask, huh? She kept on eyeing me. In Portland, no doubt. Shanna was one of the few who knew about my dabbling in the darker side of intercourse. And she absolutely hated it. So I was always a little leery of admitting to her when I'd gone. Maybe. I took another sip of wine. And you hooked up with a random woman? She asked, but quickly raised her palm up to stop me from answering. No, I'm not going to make you lie about it. Shanna, stop, I hissed at her as I gestured around to the other patrons of the fine dining establishment. All conversations around us had gone silent as they honed in on what she was saying. She looked around before lowering her voice as she leaned across our small table. But you did find a girl. You can't lie to me, Nixon Slaughter. I've known you for too damn long. Okay, so I did find someone and we had some fun. But my trips to Portland are a thing of the past. I ate another oyster as she pondered what I'd said. Good. But what happened to make you decide not to go there anymore? She eyed me again, scrutinizing my every word. The club I belong to has been destroyed, I told her, then shrugged. So I have nowhere to go now to get my fix. Good, she proclaimed as she picked up her glass and held it, as if to toast me. The sinful place is no more, and you can stop that little bit of evil you've been doing and get to finding the right woman for you. I'm not looking, I said as our main courses, king salmon for her and vermilion rockfish for me, came to the table on a large round tray carried by our helpful waiter. You're not getting any younger, Nixon. 29 is barking at your door, she reminded me. So I reminded her of the same thing. Neither are you, Shanna. And you're only 3 months younger than me. The waiter left us, and she smiled at me. Maybe it's time we both started looking for people we can settle down with. Maybe then you'd stop yearning for a woman on occasion. I looked down at my delicious meal, but the image wavered in front of me as Katana's face filled my head. I didn't think I'd ever stop yearning for at least one woman.
Chapter 8. Katana.
The weeks after the best night of my life passed by quickly, and soon enough Thanksgiving was just a week away. Many people looked forward to Thanksgiving and the celebrations they'd have with their families, but not me. I hadn't had a real Thanksgiving since I was 18. I'd had to leave the foster home after that, and I wasn't gone a year before both the people who'd taken care of me had passed away. The holidays always got me down. But this particular season was hitting me a lot harder than usual. I just didn't feel well most of the time. I had a hard time waking up in the mornings, and I couldn't make it through a day without taking a nap, a thing I'd never done. I was just off. And my mind drifted to Nixon, and that night way too often. It was like he was haunting me, and I didn't have a clue as to how to stop it from happening. One night, when I woke up after a 3-hour nap that started at 7 in the evening, I flipped on the TV, as I knew there was no way I'd be falling back to sleep anytime soon. After clicking through the channels, I found a romantic movie and sighed as I lay back on the sofa to watch it. It was all well and good, until a steamy scene came on and I felt a surge in my lower regions. And whose handsome face had to pop into my mind once again? That's right, Nix's. I stretched out and arched my back as I pretended his mouth was on my skin again. I didn't want to look like a little girl, but I also didn't want to look like a Sasquatch down there either. Dipping my finger, I pulled it up my slit, then tapped my button. In my mind, Nix's mouth had found mine and he gifted me with a gentle kiss. Our warm breaths mingled as he eased his mouth off mine and looked into my eyes. Good little minx. Now your master will satisfy your cravings for him. Yes, I'm yours, master. Only yours. I imagined him kissing me. He was teasing me. Light licks and gentle pulls were all he did. I grew antsy for more. I could hear his deep voice in my mind. You make me feel so good. My cute naughty minx. In my mind, I belonged to him. I had no desire to be with anyone else. And that thought made me inexplicably sad. I knew what I'd gotten myself into. I'd been told the rules of membership at that club. Essentially, I was nothing more than a body for some rich man to use for a while. I stopped touching and sat up, sick to my stomach. Even as I hurried to the bathroom, afraid I would puke on the light tan carpet, I thought about what I'd eaten last. That morning I'd had 2 bites of a bagel with cream cheese. My stomach just didn't agree with it, and I never found my appetite for the rest of the day. When I got into the bathroom, I stepped on the scale as a series of burps popped out of my mouth. I'd lost 5 pounds in the last week. I barely ate and slept all the damn time. Did I have mono? After a couple of dry heaves, I left the bathroom to get my laptop to search the symptoms of mononucleosis. Fatigue was at the very top, but everything that followed that, high fever, body aches, headache, muscle weakness, sore throat, swollen glands in the neck and underarms, rash, I didn't have. Well, at least it wasn't mono. At least it wasn't something I could have contracted from my one beautiful night with Nix. I wouldn't have wanted the memory of that night to be tarnished by anything negative, like me getting sick. And I'd also really hate to have to call Nixon to let him know that he should get checked for the virus because of our night together. That would be uber embarrassing. I turned off the television and headed to my bedroom to finish watching the movie in there. Grabbing a bottle of water and a sleeve of saltines out of the cabinet, I brought the crackers with me to eat in bed. Not a thing that a person with a partner would get to do. I guess I was lucky. I could eat in bed, sleep at odd hours, work when I felt like it. Many had it far worse than me. I wondered if depression had caused my problems. I knew a lot of people only got depressed during the holidays. Maybe I'd become one of those people. The good Lord knew I didn't have anything to be happy about this season. Nothing to look forward to. As a matter of fact, one of my clients had asked me why in the world I had given her December 25th as the date I'd deliver her cover to her. I told her that it was just another day for me. She told me that was sad, and I supposed it was. With no family, days like Thanksgiving, Christmas, and even New Year's meant little to me. Hell, even Halloween hardly registered on my radar. I hadn't participated in that since I was a kid in foster care. My mother had never taken me out on Halloween, from what I could remember. I also didn't remember ever having a Christmas tree or anything else special when I lived with her. My birthday must have come and gone without me knowing it, up until I was put into the system. My heart felt heavy as I lay in my bed, the television off. I didn't feel like watching any romantic shit anymore. It settled in that I had to be depressed. Who the hell wouldn't be, considering my past? While my night with Nixon Slaughter had made something inside of me light, there was no one there to keep that flame going. It had started to dwindle into nothingness the moment we parted ways. I'd been a damn fool to go to that club. Up until that night, I'd been just fine with how things were in my life. Yes, I did work myself too hard at times. Yes, sometimes I drank a bottle of wine all alone as I sat in bed and watched scary movies, until I'd end up looking around my room, paranoid about what might sneak out to get me. But I'd been okay with that life. Right. I got into bed, pulled the blanket up to my chin, and closed my eyes. They burned, and I felt dehydrated. Sitting up, I chugged the water, praying I could just rehydrate and make everything okay again. I would put Nixon out of my head, refuse to let that memory enter my brain. I'd whack at it with everything I had each and every time he tried to come back to visit me, in my imagination. No more Nixon Slaughter. Even though I'd slept some 10 hours that day with all my naps, I found myself tired still. As I drifted closer to sleep, I began to think about one of the ideas my client had run by me. Bailey Sever routinely ordered book covers from me. She wrote young adult romance under a pen name. When I'd told her about my little encounter with that world, she'd begged me to let her interview me. She'd pay me for my time, and better yet, she'd give me part of the royalties and tag me as a co-author. I hadn't taken her up on the offer yet, but as I lay there and thought about what I'd been doing, falling down the rabbit hole, I decided I would take her up on that offer. Getting back out of bed, I headed to the living room and my desk. Right then and there, I got on my laptop and sent her an email, telling her I wanted to take her up on her offer. She could call me as soon as she wanted to do the interview. Hell, I'd even make the cover of the book free of charge since she'd said she'd give me credit as the co-author. The prospect of this new work had me feeling pretty peppy, and I headed to the kitchen to make me some eggs and bacon. Crazy how getting a new project started can get you up and going again. I had to move on from that night. As spectacular as it had been, it was over. I had to get that through my head. I'd never have another night like that one. Not ever.
Chapter 9. Nixon.
The month after Halloween both dragged on and flew by somehow. It was the day before Thanksgiving, and Shanna and I were on my private jet, heading back to Texas to spend the holiday with our families. Like every day before that one, my mind was on Katana, wondering what she'd be doing for Thanksgiving. Shayna sat across the narrow aisle from me, filing her nails as we sped through the sky. "Why do you seem so zoned out, Nixon?" I'd been laying my head on the headrest, eyes closed, picturing Katana in that hotel room. I turned my head to look at her. I'm just wondering what Katana is doing tomorrow. And wishing like hell I'd gotten her number, or at least her address, so I could send her flowers or something. One blonde brow arched as she looked at me with an incredulous expression. Why? Why would you still be thinking about that little brainless twit? I sat up, taking offense at what she'd said. Hey, no reason to call her names, Shanna. And need I remind you that you don't even know her? What grounds do you have for calling her anything at all? I know all I need to know about the girl. She's into some sick shit, and can't have a brain in her head if she's into that stuff. Now, I can see a man being into that lifestyle. Of course, who wouldn't get off at least a little bit, ruling over someone? But being the one who's ruled over, well, that only means one thing in my book: no brains. She put the nail file down and picked up a magazine, thumbing through the pages. Put her out of your head, Nixon. Closing my eyes again, I tried not to think about Katana, but did anyway. Shanna was wrong about her. She wasn't brainless. Sure, I didn't know her that well, or at all really, but I knew she wasn't dumb. You know who I bet will be in town too, Nixon? Shanna asked with a lilt to her voice. Nope, I said without even opening my eyes. Bianca. My shaft twitched. Bianca had been a couple of years older than me, and often taunted me when we were kids. By the time we were in high school, though, I'd caught her giving me sideways glances, admiring how I'd grown up. I'd always had a crush on her. She was the hottest girl in school. Long legs, tan skin, dark hair that hung to her waist. And then it hit me. Katana and Bianca had a lot of similarities. Maybe that was why I had felt so instantly attracted to Katana. I sat up and looked at Shanna. You really think she might be visiting her parents? I had to admit, I was a little excited about seeing her. Why wouldn't she be there? Shanna asked. Everyone comes home for the holidays. I nodded and lay my head back again. I tried to picture Bianca. It had been 2 years since I'd seen her last. That was at Christmas. She'd been with some guy then, but gave me a little smile that told me she would have given me a bit of her time if she'd been alone. It was a smile she'd never given me before. But as hard as I tried to bring Bianca's face into my mind, I couldn't. The only face I saw was Katana's, and it was beautiful. So beautiful, it made my heart ache. I should have gotten her damn number. When the jet stopped at the San Antonio International Airport, we hopped into a rental car and headed for Pettis. It took us a little over an hour to get home, and when we did, we were greeted with open arms by our families. Just like we always did during the holidays, everyone ended up at the only cafe in town, the Dairy Queen. Shanna and I were sitting in a booth, catching up with a couple of guys I played football with in high school. They'd never left the tiny town, both working as guards at the nearby prison. I hadn't even noticed anyone coming into the place, but when a hand moved across my shoulders, I looked back to find Bianca. Hey. Hi, she purred. Wearing a maroon jacket, her dark hair pulled up into a long ponytail, she looked just like she had back in high school. When did you get here, and how long are you staying, Nixon? Today, and leaving the day after tomorrow, I answered as she came around to stand at the end of the table. The conversation at our table ceased as she ran her finger along my jaw. I like the beard. It makes you look distinguished. I chuckled. I was going for dangerous, but thanks. Her dark brown eyes cut to the side, looking out at the parking lot. I was thinking about going to Charlie's for a beer or two. Wanna take me? I sat perfectly still, unsure if I truly did want to take her. It was pretty easy to see she wanted me. And after all these years, that was a pleasant surprise. Shanna jabbed me in the ribs as she whispered, "Are you crazy? Get the hell up and take her. I can walk home from here." There went my only excuse not to take Bianca to the bar. The guys looked at me like I was insane for not jumping at the chance to be with one of the hottest chicks ever to grace our little hick town. But the fact was, I wasn't jumping. And there was only one reason why. Katana. Before I could say a word, the bell on the door jingled, and this time I noticed it. When I looked to see who it was, a tall, decently built dude was heading our way. "Shit," Bianca hissed. She walked toward him. "There you are. I was looking for you." He gave me a look before he looked back at her. "Come on." She glanced back at me and shrugged. "See you guys around." I'd missed my chance with her and knew it. I couldn't say I actually cared, but Shanna seemed invested, as she waited until Bianca and her guy walked out before lighting into my ass. "Are you crazy, Nixon? You mooned over that girl all through junior high and high school. You said if she gave you half a chance, you'd make her see God. Well, she just gave you a hell of a lot more than half a damn chance. She was throwing herself at you, Bianca style." With a shake of my head, I said, "Did you not notice that she has a man, Shanna? Damn. I'm not about to get some redneck pissed off at me over a piece of ass." Plus, even before he walked in, I couldn't seem to make myself get up and do it. Katana just kept flashing through my mind like a strobe light. I had to do something to get myself over the girl who obviously wanted nothing more to do with me. She had my number, and she had never called. The fact was, Katana had signed a paper that had her promise not to contact any man she encountered at the club. But after Halloween, the dungeon of decorum was destroyed, destroying all that with it. Nothing could stop her from calling me if she wanted to. She wouldn't be in trouble or get fined by the club. So why didn't she ever call? The answer was simple. She didn't want to. Maybe I'd been too rough. Maybe I'd gone too far. Or maybe I hadn't gone far enough or been rough enough. Who knew what the reason was? Why should I care? I kept asking myself that question over and over again. There wasn't any reason for me to care why she hadn't called. As I sat there sipping on my chocolate shake, a thought I'd never had before popped into my head. What if she had lost my card? If I went back to Portland, I might be able to find her apartment building again. I had no idea what her address was, but I wasn't opposed to knocking on every door until I found hers. Suddenly I had a plan, a real plan to find her. I got up, and Shanna looked at me in surprise. "Where are you going now, Nixon?" "Back to Mom and Dad's. I know it's noisy there and chaotic with all the nieces and nephews running around, but I need to visit them. You want a ride to your parents' place?" She got up to come with me. After shaking hands with my old friends and wishing them well, we left and I dropped Shanna off. I couldn't help but feel excited about what I'd be doing as soon as we got back to LA, and my plan began to get more and more detailed as the night went on. Thanksgiving Day. The next afternoon, Dad and I sat in the backyard, watching all the kids play. He opened the Yeti ice chest I'd bought him just that morning when we went shopping. He'd filled it up with beer and took a couple out, tossing one to me. I popped the top on it and took a nice long drink. The cold brew felt good going down my parched throat. Although it was the end of November, the temperature hovered around 90 that day, pretty hot for Thanksgiving. I didn't miss the South Texas heat one tiny bit. "So, how's it going out west, son?" Dad asked me, then took a drink of his beer. "Great." I put the bottle of beer between my legs to hold it steady as a football sailed in my direction. Catching it, I tossed it back to my oldest nephew. "Any girls you like out there?" Dad asked me. "One," I found myself saying. "But she's playing hard to get." "You're not used to that, are you, son?" He winked at me. "Not at all. But I've got a plan now." I smiled, then took another drink. Tomorrow I'd start that little plan, and soon I'd have that vixen right where I wanted her.
Chapter 10. Katana.
Thanksgiving Day. I had never felt worse than I did on Thanksgiving as I waited for my turkey pot pie to cook in the oven. Normally I'd just nuke the thing, but it being a holiday that was celebrated with turkey, I gave it a bit more love and put it in the oven. An acrid taste had plagued my mouth for over an hour, so I gave up trying to use water to get rid of it and went to brush my teeth again. While in the restroom, I noticed the unopened box of birth control pills that were sitting on the vanity. I hadn't taken any in weeks, since my stomach had been giving me fits. But something compelled me to pick up the box and look at it. When I opened it, I began to count how many I'd taken out of it. There'd been 14 pills I knew I hadn't taken. And those were there. There were 3 missing, but before those 3 there was a week's worth that I hadn't taken. My heart stopped. I'd forgotten to take my pills during that crazy week. The week right before I was with Nix. I dropped to my knees, which had suddenly gone weak, and looked up. Lord, please don't let this be what I think it is. Shaking, I got up and went into my bedroom to grab my purse and car keys. The smell of the turkey pot pie had me going to turn the oven off before leaving the pie behind and going to go to the store. As I drove around town, I found most places were closed for the holiday, but I did manage to find a convenience store and was lucky enough to find a pregnancy test. When I took it to the checkout, the clerk scanned it, then asked, "Congratulations." A shake of my head told her that was not the case. Not at all. I couldn't speak. I thought I might just burst into tears if I tried. I quickly grabbed my purchase and went back home. There were 2 sticks in the package, and I took one and headed to the bathroom. Once all set and ready to go, I found I couldn't. I was dry as a bone. Back I went to the kitchen to drink copious amounts of water. My stomach felt like it was floating in deep water, yet I still couldn't pee. I guess my nerves had shut things down. Digging through my purse, I found the business card Nixon had given me. I just stared at it for the longest time. "I'm so sorry, Nix. I didn't do this on purpose. If I am pregnant, should I tell him about it? Did he have to know? He'd made sure to ask me about birth control before we ever did a thing, and I had told him I'd taken care of it. I hadn't meant to lie about it. I thought I had been telling the truth. That damn busy as hell week was to blame for this." I sat at the kitchen table, my head in my hands as I stared at the card on the table, his name staring a hole in me. Nixon Slaughter, my baby's father's name. I shook my head back and forth. I had to stop thinking like that. I couldn't hold him accountable for this. I couldn't do that to the man. He didn't deserve that. What did he deserve? Did he deserve to know if he was going to be a father? Did he deserve the right to make his own decision about what part he wanted or didn't want to play in his child's life? I knew the answer to those questions. I wasn't without morals. I had never known my father. My mother had often said she had no idea who it was. Being a bastard child wasn't a thing I'd want for my son or daughter. But I was getting ahead of myself. I had to take the test before I could totally freak out, though I was pretty sure I already knew what the result would be. I would tell Nix if the test came back positive. I wasn't heartless. But I wouldn't ask him for a thing. He could do for the child whatever he wanted. He could see it or not. Whatever he wanted. All of this was my fault, and I'd carry the burden alone if I had to. My phone rang, jerking me back to reality. Bliss's name popped up on my screen and I answered it, my voice shaky. "Hello, Bliss. Happy Thanksgiving. You sound bad. What's wrong, Katana?" She knew me better than most people did. "Oh, nothing," I lied. "How are the kids enjoying their yummy Thanksgiving dinner?" "They hate it. No kid likes a meal that's half vegetable-based sides. Troy made a homemade pepperoni pizza for them. He's the best dad ever," she gushed. "But enough about us, how about you? What are you doing to celebrate this day?" God, I couldn't tell her I was going to maybe eat a pot pie that came out of a box, and that was the best I could expect of my night at this point. I couldn't tell her that it all depended on the results of the pregnancy test, because I knew I wouldn't have an appetite if it was positive. "Oh, not much," I finally said. "Just working." Please tell me you and a couple of friends went to eat somewhere. Please tell me you're just coming in from a fun time and are now chilling because you're so full, she begged me. Oh, how I wish I could tell her those things. I wanted to stay in. I haven't felt well in a couple of weeks. I think I have a bug or something, I told her. That was the truth after all. I had thought that up until a short time ago. No one gets a bug for a few weeks, she griped at me. You need to go to the doctor as soon as possible. Is there a non-emergency care facility open near you today? You should go today if possible. That's much too long to be sick, Katana. She might be right. I certainly would go see someone if the test came back negative, and I guess I'd be going to the doctor if it came back positive too. I'm not sure if there is anything open other than the emergency room at the hospital. I don't think this constitutes an emergency. I don't always feel bad. I'm tired all the time and have no appetite. I've made myself eat little bits here and there, but sometimes it comes back up. Are you drinking water? She asked. Because you need to drink lots of it. Even if it just comes back up, you need to keep drinking it. And you said this has been going on for a couple of weeks. Yes. I didn't want to tell her about it, but I'd lost 5 pounds in the week following Halloween, and I'd lost 5 more in last 5 days. My ribs were beginning to show, as were my hip bones. Then she gave me some helpful advice. You need to get those drinks that elderly people drink to keep their nutrients up. Oh, I forgot about those things. My foster parents, Mr. and Mrs. Baker, used to drink those. I recall liking them when I tasted them once. I got in trouble for doing that, but at least I know I like them. Sitting back, I put my hand on my stomach, as if I would even be able to feel a tiny little embryo at that point if I was preggo. I wasn't a kid. At 24, I felt mature enough to have a child. Things would work great with my job, so I could stay home to raise him or her. There wasn't much to fear. Except having to do it all alone. Would Nix want to be there for the baby? Would he want to be there for me? You should go out and buy some of those right away. If you've been sick that long, I bet you're losing weight, aren't you? Bliss asked with a knowing tone in her voice. A little. I promise I'll pick some up. And I'll go to the doctor. I would do that, one way or the other. If I was knocked up, then I'd have to, and if not, then I'd have to see what the hell was wrong with me. It couldn't just be depression. I wasn't sure if I even had depression. The only thing I was kind of sad about was Nix. I missed him every single day. But I knew time would take care of that. I couldn't be feeling this bad over missing him. Could I? And if it was that, then what could I do about it? Call him? I told him I wouldn't be doing that. I'd signed a contract stating that I'd never try to contact anyone I encountered at the club. But the club was no more, as were all the contracts in their system, right? And did the contract really matter if he wanted to hear from me too? He hadn't seemed opposed to the idea when we'd parted ways. I made a pact with myself, if I wasn't pregnant, I'd go to the doctor. If they couldn't find a thing wrong with me, I'd give Nix a call and see if he wanted to come for a visit. Maybe I'd test the relationship waters with him, if I found out he missed me the way I had missed him. There were so many variables, though. The urge to pee hit me suddenly, and I hurried to the bathroom. Okay, Bliss, I'll do everything you told me. I've got to get off here now. Love you. Happy Thanksgiving. Bye. I ended the call before she said a word, as I was about to bust. The 3 bottles of water all seemed to be ready to come out at the same time. The stream I let loose easily covered the little stick, and I placed it on a washcloth next to the sink. The next 3 minutes went by like 3 whole days. I covered my eyes the whole time until the timer on my cell went off, telling me I could look now. Moving my fingers apart, I snuck a peek at the stick. Oh shit.
Chapter 11. Nixon.
The day after Thanksgiving, Shannon and I left early to get back to the LA grind. Only I wasn't going to be staying in LA long, or going home at all. No, I was going to Portland to search for Katana Reeves. Shanna and I lived miles apart, so she took a cab back to her place, and I acted as if I was waiting for my driver to come pick me up. I wasn't. I'd already told the pilot to take an hour off, then I'd be ready to head to Portland. Chilling in one of the lounges at LAX, I was sipping on some scotch. At only a bit past noon, I knew it was a bit on the early side to be drinking alcohol, but my nerves had been stirred up. I had to do something to soothe them. My cell beeped, letting me know a text had come in. I didn't recognize the number, but opened the message anyway. Nix, it's Katana Reeves from Portland. I don't know if you remember me at all, but I need to talk to you. Can you call me when you get a chance? Why would she think I wouldn't remember her? Shit, it hadn't been a month since we'd been together. I wasted no time calling her. Her voice was soft as she answered. Nix? Yeah, it's me. How've you been? I ran my finger around the top of my glass, picturing her lovely face in my mind. Okay. And you? Same. It's funny you sent me that message. I grew tired of waiting for you to call, so I'm sitting at the airport right now, waiting for my pilot to finish his break so he can take me your way, I told her, and hoped she was going to be cool with that. Really? She asked, sounding as if she didn't quite believe that. I held up the phone and asked the bartender. Hey buddy, can you verify where I am right now? LAX, he said without hesitation. See, I said. I just got back from visiting my family in Texas, and all I could think about was getting to Portland to find you. She let out a heavy sigh, as if she were holding her breath. That's good to know. I've got a lot to talk to you about. When do you think you'll get here? She asked, and I heard her voice crack a little. A couple of hours. I'll be at the Heathman. I can send someone to get you and bring you over. I took another drink and waited to see what she'd say. I can't do what we did before, she mumbled. My heart fell. I definitely wanted to do what we'd done before. But I didn't ask why. Okay. That's fine. I just want to see you. I also wanted to find out what had taken her so damn long to contact me. If I'd had the forethought to get your number, I'd have called you a long time ago. That was my mistake. I hesitated, then went for it. I've missed you, Katana. I've missed you too, she said, and it made me sigh. She'd missed me. To be honest, I've thought about calling you often. The contract had me holding back. But then I finally realized only yesterday that the contract probably doesn't matter now that the club is closed. It's nice to hear that you missed me. I saw my pilot walking past the lounge toward the gate he'd parked the jet at. Hey, I see my pilot. I'm going to see if we can take off now. I'll call you as soon as I get there. "'Kay, bye," she said, then hung up. I hurried to catch up to Bernie, the pilot. "Hey Bernie, wait up." He stopped and turned to look at me. "Yes, sir." I caught up with him. "Are you doing anything? I mean, I'm ready to take off if you don't have anything else to do." "No, we can go. The plane's been fueled up. Can I ask how long we'll be in Portland, sir? My wife is wondering how long I'll be gone this time." "You can come right back if you want. I can just call you when I'm ready to come back. It's not like it's that far." I clapped him on the back, and we started walking to the jet. "How long have you been married?" 10 years, he said. "We've got 3 kids. "Kids, wow." I shook my head. I've never even thought about having kids. My sisters and brothers all do. I come from an enormous family. Mom and Dad had 6 of us. I'm the oldest, and I've just never found anyone I've wanted to settle down with. Tell me how you knew your wife was the one for you, Bernie. She and I clicked right from the beginning. I mean, we had a small stretch of time there where it was a little awkward, but we fell into step with each other pretty quickly. And I'd never felt about anyone else the way I felt about her. For me, it was a no-brainer. Married that girl as fast as I could. We stepped onto the plane, and I went to my seat while he went to the cockpit. "Thanks, Bernie." You sweet on someone, sir? He asked me, then winked at me. Maybe someone in Portland. Maybe, I said with a chuckle. And Bernie, do me a huge favor and stop calling me sir. Hell, you're older than I am. It's Nixon, okay? Copy that, Nixon. Buckle up now. I napped all the way to Portland. Just knowing I'd get to see Katana allowed me to have one of the calmest sleeps I'd had in a month. It wasn't until I relaxed back in that seat that I realized how pent up I'd actually been. When I got off the plane, I called Katana to let her know that I'd landed and was hiring a car to pick her up. But she told me she'd drive her own car over to meet me. I just needed to let her know when I had a room, and she'd come. The fact that she didn't want to be without her car had me a little on edge. But then again, I couldn't expect her to be at my beck and call just because I was in town. Once I'd gotten all checked in and up to my room, I called her and she said she was heading my way. As I waited, I began to get nervous and thoughts crept into my head that I hadn't considered in my excitement. What in the hell could she possibly want to talk about? I mean, I knew what I wanted, and that was another go at her. But I didn't necessarily have anything I wanted to discuss with her. She had said we couldn't do what we did last time, and that we needed to talk. So what could it be about? Had she caught an STD and wanted to blame me? I knew I was clean. Or maybe now I wasn't. Damn. A knock came at the door, and I walked over to open it, unsure how I'd react to seeing her with my current thoughts clouding my mind. But when I saw her again, my mind went quiet and my heart sped up. Wearing some jeans and a light sweater with a pair of black flats, Katana stood there, looking at me. Her blue eyes ran up and down me. I'd worn jeans and a t-shirt, and had kicked off my shoes as soon as had I gotten into the room. We just stood there, our eyes feasting on each other, until a flurry of movement broke the stillness. I grabbed her, pulling her inside and straight into my arms. Pinning her to the door, my mouth crashed down on hers and I couldn't get enough of her. Her hands moved through my hair and then over my beard. That looks good on you, Nix. There wouldn't be any more walking away from her and expecting nothing more. I had to have more of her. And it sure did seem like she had to have more of me, too. She'd told me there'd be none of this. So I wondered what made her change her mind. But I'd ask that later. It also became clear that she'd lost some weight. I felt the bones of her hips, and when I ran my hands up her sides, I felt her ribs. I hadn't taken time to notice anything. I'd wanted her too badly. Her hands caught my wrists. I have to tell you something, Nix. The way her lips began to quiver told me it wasn't anything good. Was she sick? Dying? Tell me, I whispered as I stayed right where I was. I didn't want to lose the connection. I couldn't lose it. Nix, I'm pregnant with your baby. Damn.
Chapter 12. Katana.
Silence filled the room. Nix stared at me for a long time, then rolled off me and hurried to the bathroom without saying a word. Without a clue as to what he thought about the baby, I lay there and started crying, pulling the blanket up to cover my body. I'd had no idea how he would take the news. I didn't know if there was any right way he could have reacted that would have made me happy. But this reaction definitely didn't make me happy. A few minutes later, he came out of the bathroom, a wet washcloth in his hand. He didn't look at me as he ran it over his face and came to sit on the edge of the bed. Are you positive it's mine? I know you told me that it had been over a year since you'd had intercourse, but people lie. So I need to know the truth. He looked directly into my eyes. It's okay if you lied to me. What's important now is that you and I both know the truth about everything. If there's the slightest chance it's not mine, I need to know. Did you sleep with anyone after me? I shook my head and wiped my tears away. I told you the truth before about not having intercourse for over a year. And I haven't made love with anyone else. I've been sick. I thought I had a bug. But yesterday, I took a look at my birth control pills. I hadn't taken them in a couple of weeks, since I first started feeling sick to my stomach. I saw that I'd skipped the week before I met you. I didn't do it on purpose, I swear that to you." He nodded. "I believe you. I recall you telling me you'd had a rough week. It must have been one hell of a week." It was. But I can't believe I forgot to take so many pills. I'm so sorry. I began to sob, and covered my face with my hands so he couldn't see me ugly crying. I felt his hands move over mine and he pulled them away, grabbing me up and hugging me, swaying back and forth. "Don't cry. We'll handle this. I'm so glad you told me right away. I'm so glad you didn't leave me out of this." He was glad I hadn't left him out. That was so good to hear. The truth was, I'd been worried he'd be mad at me and tell me the problem was all mine, since I had caused it. But he hadn't said that. He was holding me and telling me we'd handle things. Things were turning out better than I'd thought they would. But I knew I had to pull myself together, so I could let him know a bit more. Sniffling, I pulled back and looked at him. He took the damp cloth and wiped my tears away. "Nix, I just want you to know that I'm not going to hold you to anything. You can have as much or as little to do with this baby as you want. I can take care of him all on my own if you want nothing to do with it. I'm not trying to trap you into a relationship with me either." "I'm sure you're not," he whispered. "You've only known about the baby for a day. You're sure you want to keep it?" I nodded. It may seem like I haven't thought it all out. But I can't kill a baby. No matter how small it is. No matter if it hasn't developed its tiny little heart yet. I can't do it. I looked him right in the eyes. "I won't do it." He smiled. "Good. I'm glad to hear that. We got pregnant for a reason. God doesn't make mistakes." He'd used the word we. We'd gotten pregnant. I wasn't in this alone. He was right here with me. For the first time in my life, I had someone who was going to stick with me. I sighed. "You don't know how good it is to hear that, Nix. I promise you I won't bother you about anything. We'll figure it all out, and things will be okay." "Sure they will," he said, then kissed the top of my head. "Now I understand why you said we couldn't do what we did before. I have to tell you I was pretty disappointed when you told me that. But now I get it. And I want to tell you that makes me feel very good about the kind of mother you'll be. A pretty damn great one, I expect." I laughed a little. "I guess you should know some things about me, Nix. My mother never knew who my father was. She left me alone a lot, and one day she just didn't come home at all. I was taken to an orphanage, and later an elderly couple took me into their home and fostered me until I turned 18. "Damn," he muttered. "That's rough. I think I should take some parenting classes. It's not like I know how to care for a baby, or a child for that matter." I looked down, feeling pretty pathetic. His hand on my chin brought my face up and he kissed my lips before he said, "My mother had 6 kids. I think she'd love to teach you about babies and raising kids." His mother. "You take me to meet your family?" I asked with surprise. "Of course. You're having my baby. You have to meet the people who love him almost as much as we will." He kissed me again. This was all going too perfectly. It didn't make sense. Things never went perfectly in my world. Something would eventually happen to mess it all up. But for now things were going well, and I could enjoy the moment. When our lips parted, he had more great things to tell me. "I know this is sudden. I mean, we've been hit with a lot. But you're not in this alone. And I want to be there for you just as much as the baby. Come to Malibu. Live in my home. I'm not rushing a relationship or anything like that, so don't get scared off by what I'm saying here." "You aren't?" I asked. "I mean, I don't want to force anything either. Do you have enough room for me to have my own bedroom, so we're not moving things too fast?" "I've got 4 bedrooms. You'll have one, and the baby will have one, and we'll still have one for guests. All of the bedrooms have their own bathrooms, so we won't be getting in each other's way. He kissed my cheek. I mean it. I want to be a part of this whole thing, the pregnancy too. I don't want to miss a single thing where this child is concerned. I was grateful to hear how optimistic he was about this whole thing. But I didn't want to become a burden to him. I'll pay half the rent and all the other bills. Like hell you will. He got underneath the blanket with me and put his arm around me. What is it you do for a living, anyway? I design book covers. I'm a freelancer. I can work from home. I'll never have to leave the baby with a sitter to do my job. I smiled. The flexibility of my job made me happy. With all the worries I had about having this child, knowing that I wouldn't have to find a babysitter was a great relief. Cool. Not that you'll have to work. I've got more than enough money. But if you want to do it to keep yourself busy, go right ahead. He gave my shoulders a little squeeze. I won't be able to be your little minx for quite some time. Are you going to be okay with that, Nix? I asked, as I had no idea what he'd want. He chuckled. Yeah, I know. It's okay. I only get that urge a couple of times a year anyway. It's not my full-time thing. Glad to have heard that, I laid my head on his chest and felt safe in his arms. I'd never felt as safe as I did when he held me. I had a father for my child. A man who wanted to be there for me and our baby. I couldn't believe that a chance meeting at a club had ended up like this. With me pregnant with a wealthy man's child, being swept off to Malibu, California, to live for who knew how long. The future looked a hell of a lot brighter than it ever had before. But that niggling thing inside of me that hated to get my hopes up about anything came to pester me. Things never go right for you, Katana Reeves, you know that. Something will rear its ugly head and make this thing go south. Just you watch. I pressed my lips against Nix's chest and tried to silence the nagging voice in my head. For now, everything was going right. For now, I had a man who was going to stand up and do the right thing. This hadn't been planned, but it had happened, and he'd had the level-headedness to deal with that. For now, I would be okay.
Chapter 13. Nixon.
Katana slept like a baby in my arms the rest of the night. I suppose finally having someone there for her might have had something to do with that. I had no idea what it felt like to be all alone in the world. It must feel terrible. That's not a thing I would wish on anyone. I found it hard to believe a woman as beautiful as she could be so alone in this world. Whatever her past held, her future was bright. She'd never be alone again now that she carried our child. And no matter what, I'd never turn my back on her. But I had no idea how much of my heart I'd be able to give her. It wouldn't be fair to her to ask her to marry me after knowing each other such a short amount of time. I didn't believe in divorce, that's just the way I was raised. My parents had been married a long time and taught us all that when you married someone, you stuck with them through thick and thin. Mom and Dad didn't let any of us in on their bad times, but we knew they had them. Things would get a bit tense in our household, and words were barely spoken between them at times, but before we knew it, they'd managed to work things out behind closed doors. Mom always told us it was important for a mother and father to put their marriage above everything else. Treat it the same way you'd treat a business partnership at a highly profitable company. I didn't really understand why she'd say such a thing when I was younger. I mean, shouldn't a couple always put their kids first? But I'd overheard Mom explaining her ideology to my sister just before she got married. Mom had told her that the marriage was the foundation for the family that would soon follow. Without a firm foundation, everything would crumble. Each and every part of the family was important, and everyone had their part in it. But without a solid marriage, things could fall apart. I couldn't make a solid marriage with Katana at this point. It wouldn't be fair to either of us or the baby. But I could be kind, and I could be there for her. I knew she blamed herself for the pregnancy, she'd told me as much. But I wanted desperately to take that burden off her narrow shoulders. Then and there, I made a pact with myself to always let Katana know I was over the moon about having a baby. Because that was the truth. I'd never contemplated having a child. Not even once. But I believed that was only because I hadn't found the right woman for me. That was another strong belief that my parents had instilled in me. With Katana already pregnant, accident or not, I had no choice. I was going to be a father, end of subject. Why fight it? Why not enjoy it? My parents wouldn't be too thrilled with me at first, but they'd come around. They adored every one of their grandchildren, and they'd adore mine too, even if they didn't agree with Katana and me not being married. As I held her in my arms and breathed in the sweet scent of her lavender shampoo, I wondered how we'd end up getting along. Would she be okay with us being more like friends and co-parents rather than a couple? Because that's how I imagined this turning out. Even as that thought went through my mind, I felt her snuggling into me, letting out a sigh as she did. My heart pumped a bit harder. It made me feel good to make her feel good. She felt safe, I could tell. I could keep her safe. I could keep her mind free from worry about most things. With my money, resources, and family, there was a lot I could make happen for her, and I could do that for the rest of her life. What I couldn't do was tell her I loved her. I didn't, and I wouldn't lie to her about that. And I hoped she'd never lie to me about that either. Katana was no gold digger, at least she didn't seem to be. But that was neither here nor there. She carried my child. I'd always make sure she had more than enough to take care of the child for the rest of her life. She'd kind of hit the lottery when my seed took hold inside of her. Another thought hit me, and this one knocked me back a bit. What if I fell in love with her, but she never fell in love with me? What if she met some man someday that she did fall in love with, and wanted to marry? Where would that leave me? A deep sigh came out of me, realizing how rough things could get in the future. The future was uncertain. All I could do was my best. Suddenly, I felt the tremendous weight of responsibility resting on my shoulders. A father to a child, a co-parent with a woman who had no one else in the world, and the responsibility to make sure no one got lost or left out of our little family. I was going to have a family of my own. It might not have happened in the way I'd imagined it happening someday, but I was about to have my own family. My father had taught us all that the man of the house had more responsibility to the family than anyone else did. I kind of hoped that wasn't true. I like to think both parents carried that responsibility together. And for the most part, from what I had seen in others' marriages, that proved to be true. But then I'd had few up-close and personal experiences with marriages. When my sister had had her first baby with her husband a couple of years after they married, I was there. Things were going fine. She and her husband were working together to keep her calm and breathing through the painful contractions. A real team. Everyone had come up to the hospital to welcome the first of our expanding family. Taking turns visiting the expecting couple, some of us had waited in the waiting room while others spent some time in the room with them. I happened to be in the room with them when the shit hit the fan. Some alarm went off while she was having a contraction, and suddenly 2 nurses were coming through the door in a rush. My sister held her husband's hand and both looked nervous. I had no idea what was happening. "We have to get her to the OR right now," one of the nurses said. "Wait, why?" my brother-in-law asked. "What's going on?" The nurse, who was busily taking IV bags off the stand and placing them on the bed, answered him. "That alarm is letting us know the baby's heart has stopped beating. We'll have to do an emergency C-section." She pressed the call button on the bed, and another nurse asked what she needed. "Get the OR ready and get the doctor and everyone else in there now," she told her. My sister began to cry. "What's going to happen?" she asked the room in general. The nurse nearest to her patted her on the arm. "You'll be put under, and we'll get the baby out and see what we can do about getting its heart going again." She looked at my brother-in-law. "Daddy, can you help keep Mommy calm until we put her under? And you'll need to throw on some scrubs. They're in the room just before we get to the operating room. You'll need to hurry." You'll have decisions to make once the baby is delivered. Decisions your wife won't be able to make, as she'll be asleep." His face paled and he nodded. But the color quickly rushed back to his face, and he looked at his wife with a strength he hadn't had before. "I love you. I've got this. I've got you, and I've got our son. You have nothing to worry about. You can count on me." He looked at me, frozen in my place with shock and worry. "Nixon, I need you to go out and inform the family about what's happening. Tell them I will come out and let you all know how things are going, as soon as we have everything under control." "I love you, sis," I managed to say, and then I hurried out of the room. In that moment, I'd seen the transfer of energy. I'd seen what a wife looked like when put into a situation where she was completely helpless, and I'd seen the weight of responsibility come to rest on the husband's shoulders. Later, after the baby was born, and after they'd discovered that the umbilical cord had prolapsed and been pinched by the baby's head, causing the heart to stop beating, my brother-in-law had come out. "He's fine. And so is she. It was scary, but I don't want any of you to worry. I'll take good care of my wife and son," he said. My mother went to hug him, and she started to cry. "You're a great man. Our daughter is lucky to have you." We'd all nodded, and everyone had gained a lot of respect for the man our sister had married. And after witnessing similar scenes with the rest of my family, I knew the possible obstacles that could come my way with a baby and a woman to take care of. A heaping load of responsibility. Daunting, yes, but completely doable. I kissed the top of Katana's head, closing my eyes and trying to stop thinking about everything so I could fall asleep. My future had been changed forever, and I could rest well knowing that I'd been brought up right and could handle all I'd just been given.
Chapter 14. Katana.
After finally getting a good night's sleep, I woke up feeling refreshed and better than I had in a very long time. I heard noise coming from the bathroom and knew Nixon had gotten up before me. When I sat up and stretched, I saw something hanging on the hook on the closet door, and saw a brand new pair of black flats sitting at the bottom of a garment bag. A smile curled my lips, realizing Nix had already had something sent up for me to wear since my clothes had been pretty much destroyed. He really knew how to take care of a girl. I had to count myself lucky that I'd gotten myself knocked up by him and not some lowlife. The bathroom door opened and steam poured out of it, shrouding a hulking figure. Nixon stood there with a towel wrapped around his waist, as he used another one to dry his hair, rubbing his head. "Hey, pretty lady. Glad to see you up. Wanna go grab some breakfast?" He jerked his head toward the garment bag. "I got you something to wear." Climbing out of bed, I took the sheet with me to wrap around myself. The weight loss had me feeling self-conscious about my thin body. "I'll get showered and dressed so we can head out." He stepped out of my way but reached out to me, grabbing the top of the sheet. "Why are you hiding behind that?" Ducking my head, I mumbled, "I'm not hiding." He let the sheet go and took me by the chin. "You're not happy with your weight, are you?" I shook my head. "Not really." "Don't worry. I'll make sure you're well taken care of now. We'll find a doctor in Los Angeles to help you feel better." He kissed my forehead. "I've got you. Don't worry about a thing." "I already feel a lot better," I admitted, looking into his green eyes. "Your support means the world to me. I know this wasn't planned." He put his finger to my lips. "Hush. I want you to know something. It doesn't matter that this wasn't planned. I'm over the moon about this baby, and I can't thank you enough for making this all so easy." I couldn't believe what I heard coming out of his mouth. He was over the moon. "You're a surprising man, Nixon Slaughter. It's been less than a day since you found out about this baby, and already you're stepping up to the plate much faster than I'd ever thought possible." "Yeah, well, what's done is done. Why fight it? Might as well enjoy this as much as a real couple would, right?" he asked, then walked away from me. "That's a great attitude to have," I said as I went into the bathroom. As great as his attitude was, what he'd said hit me harder than it should have. Maybe it was the hormones, I couldn't tell, but I felt tears welling up in my eyes and they fell down my cheeks. We weren't a couple. We were hardly more than strangers. And we had been pushed together by this pregnancy. How'd I ever gotten myself into such an awkward situation? How would a child fare with parents who didn't even love one another? I stepped into the shower, letting the water wash my tears away. My hands trembled as I moved them over my flat stomach. There was something growing inside of me, a tiny human that would grow bigger and bigger with each passing day. And the father and I barely knew one another. Trying my best to pull myself together, I tried to stop thinking such thoughts and concentrate on the fact that I had someone who'd be by my side through all of this. Granted, I had no real idea how helpful Nixon would prove to be, but what he'd said told me he'd be great. Having him would be a hell of a lot better than doing this all on my own. A knock on the door jolted me out of my internal thoughts. Hey, if you don't feel up to going out, I can order room service. It's all up to you. If you want to order in, then you can do that, I called out, and then finished rinsing my hair. He opened the door and stepped inside. I want you to decide, Katana. It doesn't matter to me. I moved back a bit, hoping the water hitting the clear glass shower door would distort my image somewhat. My hip bones jutted out, and I hated the way they looked. Pick, he said, undeterred by my lack of an answer. There's a breakfast buffet going on in one of the cafes downstairs. Doesn't that sound good? I could see he wasn't going to make the decision, so I made one. Yeah, let's do that. I'm getting out now. "'Kay," he walked back out, leaving the door wide open. As I dried off, I thought about how nice Nix was. Things might really work out with us. Not that I expected him to fall in love with me or anything like that, but it would be nice to get along well with him. I might be living with the guy for the next 18 years or so, and getting along would make that easier. Wrapping the towel around myself, I went to grab the garment bag and saw him watching television. "How are you feeling?" "Pretty good," I said, taking the bag of clothes and heading back to the bathroom to get dressed. I found another very expensive dress in the bag and pulled on the dark blue knee-length dress. It zipped up the back, and I couldn't seem to get it all the way up. Doing the best I could, I headed out and asked him to zip me the rest of the way up. I slipped on the flats and we headed out. His hand on the small of my back felt nice. The way people looked at us as we came into the breakfast area had me smiling as they gave us polite nods and morning greetings. It was very unlike the way people had looked at us when we'd come to the same place nearly a month ago. Now we were seen differently than we'd been before, something closer to a couple than a dirty one-night stand. And it made me feel even better. A hostess told us to sit anywhere we liked, after letting us know that the cost of the buffet would be added to the hotel room bill. The food was decadent, and everything looked and smelled terrific. Nixon led me to a table near the window. "Like this? Or want to sit somewhere else?" "This is fine, Nix." I placed my purse on the chair, and we headed to the buffet. He stood close to me as we filled our plates, pointing out healthy things like the fresh fruits and telling me they'd be great for the baby and me. A smile stayed on my face as he doted on me and our little unborn baby already. When we sat down to eat, he reached across the table, taking my hand. "Thanks again for letting me know about this so early on. I doubt most women would be as nice as you are about this. Would you like me to set up a moving service to get your things to my place today?" "Today?" I asked, just before I put a piece of delicious hickory smoked bacon into my mouth. "Sure, why not today?" he asked and then cut his stack of pancakes, taking a bite. "Well, I have to let my landlord know I'm moving. I have a lease. He might not let me out of it." I took a drink of apple juice and waited to see what he thought about that. "I'll pay to get you out of the lease. Should we go see him today and get that taken care of?" he asked, putting his fork down and looking at me. "I want to take you home with me." Flattered, I had no idea what to say. There were things I had to take care of. Not a ton of things, but there were some. I had laundry I had to get done, and I'd need to pack my things. I'd have to get boxes to do that. Nix, I'll need about a week to get things done. A week? He looked stunned as he shook his head. That's too long. I want to get you to a doctor. I don't think this is an emergency, I said with a laugh. And I don't think we'll get an appointment that quickly anyway. A week's not that long. He looked at his plate, then picked up a piece of bacon, munching on it as he thought about what I'd said. His brow furrowed, probably thinking about what he could say to speed me up. I can stay with you then, help you get everything done. My apartment was a complete wreck. Being sick, or pregnant I guess, had left me too tired to do much of anything. In no way did I want him to see the mess the place had become. Nix, can I be honest with you? Please do, he said, then reached out and took my hand. You can always be honest with me, Katana. Great, I sighed as I readied myself to come clean with him. My place is a wreck right now. I don't want you to see it. Since I've been so sick. He gave my hand a squeeze as he interrupted me. Stop right there. If you think I'm going to judge you about the state of your apartment, you're dead wrong. As a matter of fact, let me hire a maid service to get things cleaned up for you. Let me take care of you. He shook his head before changing his mind about what he'd said. No, scratch that. I am going to take care of you. I'm hiring a maid service to clean your place. I'm hiring movers to pack your things and bring them to Malibu. And I'm going to go with you to talk to your landlord to settle any money owed for breaking the lease. No discussion. I didn't know what to think or say to all that. But then my mouth opened, and out came the words I'd had no idea would come. No, I'll take care of those things myself, Nix. I'll be at your place in a week. And I'll take care of any money my landlord says I owe. Thank you, but I can do this part on my own. Now, where did that come from?
Chapter 15. Nixon.
I had to admit that Katana had stupefied me when she flat out turned down my help. But it did let me know the woman was no gold digger, not that I'd truly suspected that anyways. It had been a week since I'd left her to take care of things on her end, and I expected her to show up at any time. The movers had already brought her things to my place the day before, and everything had already been put away. She'd come home to find she had nothing to do. I hoped she'd be pleased about that. Before I left her in Portland, I gave her a house key and wrote down the code to the security system for her, just in case I wasn't home when she arrived for some reason. But I couldn't wait for her to come home, so I took off early to be there. When the front door opened around noon, I hopped up, feeling excited about our new beginning. Hey! My face dropped, and I stopped right where I was as I saw it wasn't Katana, but Shanna who'd come in. Hey yourself! What in the hell are you doing home so early on a workday? I hadn't said one word about my news to anyone. And out of everyone in my life, I knew Shanna would be the one to think what I was doing was stupid. Sitting back on the sofa, I said, I've got something going on. And just what are you doing here? And why aren't you at work? It's Friday. I always get off early on Fridays. And I often come over here to lie out on your deck and chill from the weekly grind for a few hours. She took the seat across from me. You did give me your key, and you did tell me to come over anytime I wanted. I had done that. And now I kind of regretted doing so. How would Shanna take Katana, and vice versa? Leaning forward, I rested my elbows on my thighs and steepled my fingers, trying to think of how I should tell Shanna my news. There really was no right way to tell her about this, so I just went for it. Okay, you need to know something. Things are about to change. And I mean a whole hell of a lot. I saw her eyes move across the room to the brand new rocking chair I'd bought for us for when the baby was here. She jerked her chin at it. Why the new rocker, Grandpa? She'd left me a perfect opening, and I went for it. I'm going to be a father, Shanna. Her blue eyes came back to me, and her jaw hung open. No. I nodded and sat back. The woman I told you about, the one who'd been on my mind so much? The mindless skank, she gasped. Hey. I narrowed my eyes at her. Shanna, you've been my best friend for a very long time, but I'm not about to let you talk that way about the mother of my child. She's not what you think she is. She's actually a freelance book cover designer, and a sweet woman. She'd thought we'd be fine, but she'd forgotten to take her birth control pills before we met that night at the club. Sure she did, Shanna said as she narrowed her eyes right back at me. This skank might not be mindless after all. She might be very devious. Going to a club like that, filled with rich men, she knew exactly what she was doing. You're a fool, Nixon. Lucky for you, I can take care of this gold-digging skank. You won't be taking care of a thing, Shanna. Katana isn't at all what you think she is. She'd had a hell of a rough week and forgot to take the pills. I believe her. I got up and paced, trying to calm myself down. She'd gotten me pretty damn mad, which didn't happen very often, especially with her. Nixon, you need to face the facts. She used you to get her pregnant, so she'd have a meal ticket she could use the rest of her pitiful life. Shanna got up too and walked toward me, grabbing me by the shoulders to stop my pacing. You'll need to get a DNA test done once the kid's born. If it is yours, you should get custody of it, and leave her out in the cold. I'll help you raise the kid, and you know your parents would drop everything to come help you too. Don't let this skank mess you any further than she already has. As I stood there looking into the eyes of this woman who I'd always trusted, I didn't know what to think. What if she was right? I didn't know Katana Reeves at all. I knew so little about her, and yet I'd already made a huge commitment to her. Shanna might be right about everything. But what could I do now? She'll be here today. I asked her to come live with me, I blurted out. Shanna let me go and turned around, slapping her forehead. Shit. Are you serious right now? Why in the hell would you do something that damn drastic, Nixon? I want to do what's right. Look, you really don't know her. She's not what you think. If she were a gold digger, then she'd have let me do all I wanted to do for her. She wouldn't let me spend a dime to get her out here. She offered to pay half the bills here, which I said no to, of course. Shanna spun around with a terrible frown on her face. Nixon, please tell me you can see through all of that. Sure, why not take on the little expenses of moving all her things and whatever else she had to do? In the end, she'll be rich because you're being a fool. I just couldn't see Katana being that type of person. She'd never even been to that club before. She's a foster kid with no family she knows of. I couldn't leave her to fend for herself while carrying my baby. She's been sick with the pregnancy. Is that what she told you? Shanna asked as her hands went to her narrow hips. Because people can lie, you know. She's lost weight, at least a good 10 pounds, and in a very short amount of time. She's not lying. I want to be a part of this whole thing. I want to share this with her. Understand or not, it doesn't matter. I'm moving her in with me, and we're going to raise this child together. Are you saying you're going to marry her? She asked, then blew her blonde bangs out of her eyes. I didn't say that. We're not in love. We've only been together twice. It would be insane to ask her to marry me, right? I asked, as it kind of had been on my mind, the idea to make things real between us. The last week had me thinking about her even more than I had been before she'd told me her news. I kept picturing her beautiful face, hearing her delicate voice, and I missed her even more than I had in the first place. This entire thing is insane, so yes, she answered. Asking her to marry you would be such a giant mistake. I sat down and put my head in my hands. Shanna's reaction was the exact reason I hadn't told a soul about what I was doing with Katana. Without other people's input, I'd made every decision quite easily. But now I was second-guessing everything I'd decided. I miss her, Shanna. You know I already missed her before. I decided to do some confessing to my best friend. Maybe I'd been wrong to hide so much from her. Maybe that was why she'd taken this firm position, because she didn't understand everything. When we got back from Texas, I had already decided I was getting back on the jet and going to Portland to find her. But she called me before I even started heading her way. When we met at my hotel, We couldn't keep our hands off one another, and ended up in bed before she could even tell me a thing. She looked stunned. You hid that from me? Why? I knew you would have tried to stop me. I looked at her, and hoped she could see how I really felt about Katana. I didn't want to take Bianca to the bar that night, because I had Katana on my mind. I've had her on my mind since I left her that first day. I have no idea if she'll ever fall in love with me, but I can tell you this, I'm on the fast track to falling in love with her. But I won't push her about that. I don't want her to feel she has to love me for me to be in the baby's life. Well, damn, dude. She shook her head. And her words just about summed it all up.
Chapter 16. Katana.
As I drove up the hill toward the address Nix had given me, my GPS told me the next house was my destination. Someone was coming out the front door, a tall, lithe, pretty blonde, and she didn't look too happy as she got into her car and sped off in the opposite direction. Pulling into the driveway she'd just left, I found a bit of jealousy piercing my heart. Maybe she's just the maid. Shrugging off the bit of negative emotion, I readied myself to go into what would be my home for the next little while. I didn't have high hopes of staying forever in Nixon's home. While his intentions were good, I assumed that sometime in the future he'd find a woman who was good for him, someone clearly in his league, a thing I wasn't. Getting out of the car, I grabbed my purse and the overnight bag I'd packed for my brief stay at a motel in Portland, which I'd gone to after making sure the movers got everything from my old place. They'd taken off right away, aiming to get my things to Nixon's ahead of my arrival. Now I'd have to get inside and try to get things put away so my crap wouldn't be looming in boxes, taking up space. When I got to the door, I went to punch in the code to disarm the security system before I used the key to open the door, just as Nix had told me to. But I thought it might be best to ring the bell instead, just in case he was home, which I couldn't tell from out here as his garage was closed. When the door opened, I saw Nix's handsome face. Hey, why'd you ring the bell? I told you to come on in. He wasted no time pulling me inside and hugging me. I've missed you. When he closed the door and pinned me to it, I got the feeling his body reacted much as mine did. He looked at me with hungry eyes, and I ran my hands over his bearded face. It's grown even more. You look so dangerous. Leaning down, he kissed me softly. Good, that's exactly what I was going for. Did you miss me at all? Only every waking moment. I didn't want to go that far. It was never my intention to make him feel like I wanted more than he was willing to give me. I might have. His hands moved down my arms as he pressed his bulge against me. You have this crazy effect on me. I laughed but stopped short when I heard someone in the kitchen. Someone's here. Yeah, the maid. He kissed me again. Damn, I guess I should introduce you to her. So the woman I saw wasn't the maid, then who was she? I kept my thoughts to myself. Yes, you should introduce us. After that, I really need to get to work putting my things away. No need, I had that all taken care of, he said, moving to one side and draping his arm across my shoulders. You had everything unpacked and put away. Already? I was shocked and amazed and thankful. Yeah, I had the movers do some and my maid and her son did the rest. I hope you don't mind. He stopped and pointed at a rocking chair that sat near the glass doors, which led outside to a gorgeous wooden deck. I bought that yesterday for us to rock our baby in. Do you like it? The wooden rocker had been whitewashed, making it look rustic. It's nice. I do like it. How thoughtful you are. He shrugged and moved on, pulling me with him. I don't know what's getting into me. When we stepped into the kitchen, my eyes landed on a middle-aged woman who was a little red in the face from cleaning the inside of a cabinet. Mona Black, I'd like you to meet the lady of the house, Katana Reeves. Wiping her hands on her white apron, she made her way to me. It's a pleasure to meet you, ma'am. I shook her hand and took in her friendly smile.
Mr. Slaughter has told me your good news.
Congratulations. I looked at Nix and wondered why on earth he'd have this woman, who was clearly older than him, calling him such a formal name. Whatever his preference was, I wasn't about to be called ma'am or Miss Reeves. Thank you. It's nice to meet you. And please call me Katana. I'll do that. She went back to what she was doing before, still talking. I've planned roasted chicken with asparagus and wild rice for dinner this evening. Will that be okay with you, Katana? I looked at Nix, who smiled at me then winked. She works for you too, Katana. Not sure I like that at all, I answered. Anything you make will be fine with me. Just keep on doing what you've been doing for Nix. I don't need any special treatment. You don't hesitate to let me know if you want anything special, Katana. That is what I'm paid to do after all, look after you guys. She got back to work as Nixon pulled me away from the kitchen. Let me show you around. He pointed out the glass doors. That's the deck. There's a set of stairs that lead down to the beach. He had my hand in his and led me across the large living room. On the other side of the kitchen is a formal dining room that I rarely use. He pointed to a door under the stairs. That's a closet where things are stored. Next to this is the room we'll leave as the guest room. Then up the stairs we went, and he pointed to the room at the end of the long hallway. That's my bedroom back there. The door on the left is the baby's, and the one on the right is yours. You have access to a balcony through a set of French doors. You and I share that balcony. My room has another set of French doors that lead out to it as well. This place is gorgeous, Nix. I can't believe I get to call it home for a while, I gushed. Then I thought about the maid we'd left back in the kitchen, and looked at him as I put my hand on his chest. Since I'm here, I can help with the daily chores. I can wash our clothes and keep things clean up here in our rooms and bathrooms. If you won't let me pay you anything, then I want to help out around the house. He chuckled. No way. I'm paying the maid to do that work. You wouldn't want to put Mona out of a paying job, now would you? He pulled me along with him and opened the door to my new bedroom. What do you think? We can change it up any way you want. It's perfect just the way that it is, I said as I looked at the gorgeous furnishings. The bed, a small desk, and the bedside tables were all made of cherry wood. A very large flat-screen television hung on the wall, making it easy to lie in bed and watch it, which I might do whenever I wasn't gazing out the windows or doors at the perfect view of the blue waters of the Pacific Ocean. This is more than I ever expected. Nix's hand went into his pocket and came back with what looked to be a credit card. This is for you. I want you to buy whatever you want or need. I shook my head as I held up my hands in protest. Nix, I can't take that. I have my own money. He took my right hand and placed the card in my palm. You will take this. I know you have your own money, but I want you to have access to more than just that. Just take it, and don't fight me on it. Please. I'd take it, but I wasn't planning to ever use it. I laid it and my bag and purse on the bed. Thank you, Nix. Thank you for everything. He took both my hands in his and kissed them. Thank you, Katana Reeves. I can honestly say that I've never felt more at home than I feel with you here. You and I will make a happy home for our child, I can tell that already. What kid wouldn't be happy here? I asked as I glanced around the room again. I mean happy with us. You and me, he clarified, then kissed me and pulled me in close. His hands moved over my back, then down to my butt, pulling me to him. I melted into him. This wasn't what I'd expected, but I was happy he wanted me physically. I wanted him that way too. But with the intercourse, we ran the risk that feelings might get in our way of making this work for our baby. When he released my lips, I asked, Nix, is what we're doing really smart? I mean, I love having intercourse with you, you know I do. No one could fake that. But should we be doing this? His sigh was long and his eyes drooped a bit. You don't want to anymore. I did want to. I wanted to very badly. But I didn't know how smart it was to keep doing the things that other couples would do. I bit my lip, then finally said, I don't want to force a relationship on you. Having intercourse will have some effects, on me at least. I can't stop my feelings for you from developing if we continue as we have been. He let me go and turned away from me, rubbing his head. I want you, Katana. He turned back around. Do you want me? I nodded. But I don't think it's smart. Then passion is off the table. Is it?
Chapter 17. Nixon.
Katana's eyes stared a hole in the floor. She looked as if she was contemplating actually take intercourse off the table. So I had to step in. I took her chin in my hand and made her look at me. Hey, I don't want to stop anything from happening with us either. If that's what you're thinking, just stop doing that. We have some pretty amazing chemistry. Why try to act like we don't? The fear in her blue eyes became evident. I'm just afraid. I kissed her plump red lips with one feather-soft kiss. I can see that. Don't be afraid of anything, Katana. Let's just ride this wave, doing whatever we want. Let's not let the fear of what might happen stand in our way of being happy with what we have right now. Which is what exactly? She asked before running her hands up my arms and resting them on my shoulders. I mean, what are we, Nix? Two people who happen to be extremely attracted to each other, but are doing things backward. We're having a baby, while also getting to know one another and seeing what the future might hold for us. I kissed her again, softly and sweetly. When our lips parted, I loved the smile that moved over her face. Okay. I think I can handle that. Her long dark lashes fluttered as a blush covered her cheeks. I've got one more thing to ask you. Shoot, I said, then kissed the tip of her adorable nose. If we have a girl, I hope she has this precious little turned-up nose just like you do. She giggled, and the blush went a shade deeper. You're so sweet, Nix. Being pregnant with your child, I don't have any intentions of being with other men. She looked at me, and I saw concern in her eyes. What about you? Me neither, but then again I've never been with any men. I chuckled, and she smacked my chest lightly. You know what I mean, she said with a scowl on her pretty face. Are you going to stop seeing other women? Oh boy, things just got real, didn't they? Was I going to take myself off the market? Was I ready to do that? I didn't even know Katana that well at all. What if there were things about her that just didn't sit well with me? She could have some nasty habits I just couldn't cotton to. I mean, who knew if we'd actually get along or not? But looking into her eyes, I told myself that I should forego seeing other women until I knew for certain that she and I weren't compatible. I think I can be satisfied with just little ol' you. We don't have to put this agreement in stone. We have a lot to get to know about one another before we decide whether we're interested in pursuing more later on if we want. But for now, yeah, I'll stay away from other women, and you stay away from other men. She let out a big breath. Good. Then she kissed me, and we fell into that blissful state of just being together. It seemed the most natural thing to me, being with her. But as we continued kissing and my shaft grew, I heard her tummy growling and stopped the kiss. If I didn't stop now, I knew this would lead all the way to the bed. You're hungry. Not so hungry that we need to stop where we were headed, she protested. I wasn't having any of that. I took her hand in mine, leading her out the bedroom door. I'm getting you something to eat. I'll have Mona make you a sandwich to tide you over until dinner's ready. She lagged behind, whining, Really, Nix, I can wait for dinner. I'm not that hungry. My tummy has just started growling a lot. I have no idea why that is. I had to laugh. Was she really so clueless? Baby, you have a little human you're growing inside of you. You need to eat a lot more so our kid will be healthy. Taking her straight into the kitchen, I didn't see Mona anywhere and figured she was doing something elsewhere. So I sat Katana down and went to the fridge to make her a sandwich myself. Ham? I asked. I kind of hate ham. Do you have turkey? She asked, then tried to get up. I can make my own sandwich, Nix. I turned around and placed my hands on her shoulders. I've got this. So turkey and Swiss. I asked as I found some sliced Swiss cheese in the lunch meat drawer. Sounds great. And thank you, she said, then pulled out her cell and looked at her social media while I got to work. A beep from the alarm system alerted me that it was being deactivated again, and my stomach went tight. I knew there were only 4 people who had the code to my system, and 3 of them were already in the house. That would be Shanna, I told Katana, watching her eyes go big. Shanna? Who's that? She asked. Shanna came into the kitchen before I could answer her. And she didn't wait 1 second for me to introduce the two. I'm Shanna, Nixon's best friend. You must be the woman who says she's pregnant by him. Katana got up and extended her hand in a polite gesture, but Shanna didn't shake it. I'm Katana Reeves. It's a pleasure to meet you, Shanna. When Shanna just looked at Katana's hand for several moments, Katana pulled it back and took a seat. Shanna did the same, sitting across the small table from her. I hated the way she was eyeing Katana and stepped in, placing the plate with the sandwich and chips in front of Katana. I think milk would be best for you to drink. I turned to grab a glass and then wondered if she had any allergies. I turned back, placing my hand on her shoulder. Wait, are you lactose intolerant, or do you have any allergies I should know about? No, I'm allergy-free as far as I know, and I can have dairy. Thank you, Nix, Katana said, then bit into her sandwich as Shanna stared at her. I had to hand it to Katana. She didn't seem to be intimidated by Shanna in the least. But then I remembered that Katana had been in an orphanage, and then in foster care. She'd probably had to learn at a very early age how to deal with assholes, which my best friend was definitely being. After placing the glass of milk on the table, I took a seat, pulling my chair closer to Katana's than Shanna's. So what brought you back here, Shanna? I wanted to meet her, of course, she answered me. So what's the deal with you two? What do you mean? Katana asked, wiping her mouth with the napkin I'd given her. I mean, do you think you're going to come in here and take over my best friend's life? Shanna tapped her foot as she stared Katana down. I'd had enough. Shanna, stop. Shanna's light brows rose and she looked appalled. Nixon, someone has to look out for you. I'm not about to let some money-grubbing skank. I stood up and took her by the arm. I will not have you speaking that way in my house, Shanna. I jerked her up and pulled her toward the door. But Katana stopped me. It's okay, Nix. She can ask me anything she wants to. She just cares about you. That's why she's upset right now, I understand that. Please, let her sit back down, and she and I can get to know one another. If she's your best friend, then she's pretty important to you, and will be to our baby as well. I let Shanna's arm go, and wagged my finger in her face. You chill on the name calling. You're lucky she's nice, Shanna, or you'd have been out on your ass. Be nice. She's the mother of my child. My blood. And you know how I am about blood. It takes priority over everyone else. Don't make me cut you out of my life. Shanna went pale. I suppose she'd never imagined I'd actually do such a thing to her. Nixon. I nodded and took my seat again. I am dead serious. Now play nice. Shanna took her seat and looked apologetic. Well, seems he's got a protective instinct for you, Katana. I'm sorry. I've known this man since we were little kids. He and I were in the same classes all through our school years. I lived 3 houses down from his, and we walked to school together every day for 13 years. He's beaten up my boyfriends when they hurt me, and he's let me cry on his shoulder about them too. He's a rare man, and I count myself lucky to be able to call him a friend, let alone my best friend. Katana finished up her sandwich and then took a long drink of her milk before saying anything else. Sorry, I didn't realize just how hungry I was until I took that first bite. She patted my leg underneath the table. Thanks, sweetie. Then she turned her attention to Shanna. I think it's admirable of you to want to watch out for Nix. He's lucky to have a friend like you who cares so much. I'd like to set the record straight, though. I am not a money-grubbing skank. She isn't, I agreed. I have told you that before. Katana smiled at me, and ran her hand over my bearded cheek. "Ah, you stood up for me before? That's so sweet of you." "Yeah, he's a real sweetheart," Shanna said, then shook her head. "Not. At least, not usually." She narrowed her eyes at me, looking like she was trying to solve a puzzle. "I don't think I've ever seen you make anything for anybody in my entire life, Nixon. And I've never seen him look at anyone the way he looks at you, Katana. But I want to warn you both, you don't know one another. Try your best not to rush into things more than you already have." But it felt like life was rushing ahead for us, and at a staggering pace.
Chapter 18. Katana.
After several days had passed, I began to feel more settled. Nix and I had chosen an obstetrician and had an appointment set up for the late afternoon. Nerves were getting the best of me, and I ended up puking 3 times before he arrived at 3 to pick me up. Holding my hand on the console between the seats, his thumb ran back and forth over the top of my hand. "You look pretty in that pink dress." He pulled my hand up and kissed it. "Can I assume that means you're hoping for a girl?" I shook my head. "I'm hoping for a healthy baby." I looked out the window. I don't know how to take care of either anyway. Nix told me he wanted to wait to be sure I stayed pregnant before he told his family about our situation, but once we were past the critical 3-month mark, he'd tell them about everything. "You know, I told you my mother would help you with all that. I don't want you to worry even a little bit about that. You'll be a great mother." "I know you will." He kissed my hand again, and I couldn't help but smile. I don't know how he made me feel so much better just by being with me, but he did. "I know you'll be a great father." "I'm going to try." He chuckled. "I had to lie to my mother a while ago." "Why?" I asked, surprised he'd have to lie about anything. "She wanted me to come for Christmas, and I told her I'd made plans with my business partners for that day, so I couldn't come this year." He shook his head. "I don't lie often. It felt pretty unnatural doing it, but I don't want to jump the gun with our news." Thinking about losing the baby made my stomach roll, and I swallowed as saliva suddenly began to produce rapidly. I saw a stoplight ahead and prayed he'd make it to that before I had to open the door and hurl. I couldn't even say a word, as I felt sure I'd projectile vomit all over his expensive car. When Nick stopped at the light, I opened the door and let it all out. "Baby," he called out. It took no time to expel the little that was left in my stomach, and I closed the door and leaned my head back on the headrest when I was done. "God, I hate that." He handed me a tissue as he shook his head. "Damn, I hate that for you." By the time we got to the doctor's office, the butterflies in my tummy had turned into pterodactyls, and I had to cling to Nix for support. I'd never really leaned on anyone in my life. It felt odd, and even a little dangerous, but I couldn't help it. The waiting room was full of expecting mothers in various stages of pregnancy. A few small kids were playing with some toys in one corner, and I noticed only a handful of fathers there with the women. I squeezed Nix's arm, which I had wrapped mine around. "Thank you, Nix." "For?" he asked as he grinned at me.
"Being here with me."
"For me." I kissed his cheek. "You're my rock." He kissed mine right back. "I am that. And I wouldn't miss this for anything." When my name was called, we got up. He wrapped his arm around me, supporting me, and I knew he could feel my body shaking. "I'm so scared." "No reason to be. Nothing bad will happen to you. Come on, be brave. For our baby, be brave." He kissed my cheek once more, and in we went. The doctor was a man in his late 50s. He passed us in the hallway and stopped to introduce himself. "You're new." He extended his hand, and we took turns shaking it. "I'm Dr. Sheffield." Nix took the lead. "I'm Nixon Slaughter, and this is Katana Reeves." "Nice to meet you both. Do the deal with the nurses, and I'll come see you soon." He walked away, leaving us to follow the nurse once more. "He seemed nice," I said, and felt a tiny bit better about this whole thing. "I'm sure he's very nice." And he had many high recommendations. I think we picked the right man for the job, baby. He gave me a confident smile, and I had to smile back. After an hour of being weighed and measured, and giving urine and blood samples, I was handed a paper robe, and Nix and I were sent to a room to wait for the doctor. I undressed behind a little curtain while Nix looked at the posters on the walls, which depicted the stages of a developing fetus. "Let's see here," he said as I changed. "It's now the 12th of December, and that means we're 6 weeks. That means we should be able to hear the baby's heartbeat, according to this chart." I came out wearing the unflattering paper robe and looked at the table I had to climb up on. Then I felt hands on my waist turning me around. Nix lifted me up, putting me on the table. "Thank you." I couldn't help the smile that took over my face. The man was just too damn good. "You look adorable. Can I take a picture of you? I swear I won't post it on anything. I just want to chronicle everything." He pulled his cell out of his jacket pocket and cocked his head as he waited for my approval. "Swear to make me look good in this silly thing?" I asked. He nodded. "You'll look like a pinup girl, I swear." With a nod, I gave him approval, and found him snapping a ton of pictures and taking selfies with me in the pictures too. He had me laughing and feeling a lot less nervous in no time at all. When Dr. Sheffield came in, he wore a wide grin on his face. He pushed one hand through his salt and pepper hair as he came to us. "Glad to see you two having a good time. It's nice to see people celebrating bringing a new life into the world." He opened up the folder with all my information and looked it over. "Says here you two are certain about the date of conception, and that some people must have had a fun time on Halloween." He grinned knowingly at us. "That we did," Nixon confirmed.
So when are we going to be seeing our little baby's face, Doc?
"If everything goes right, you'll see your baby on the 24th of July. How does that sound?" The doctor walked over to the counter to put on a pair of gloves. My heart began to pound then. I knew what the gloves meant, and wasn't real keen on Nix being there while the doctor poked and prodded me. But I guessed that would be something I'd have to get used to. Nix did seem set on being a part of every little bit of the pregnancy, as much as he could be at least. I must have had a wild-eyed look on my face as the doctor came and pushed me gently back. Nix took the place on my right, holding my hand and smiling at me reassuringly. "You'll be just fine, baby." I nodded, but didn't feel just fine as the doctor placed my feet in the stirrups. Then he pushed something cold inside of me as he said, "We'll just get this pap smear out of the way, then I'll do a transvaginal ultrasound and see if we can hear a heartbeat." My entire body tensed as he cranked the mechanism, opening me up so he could do the test. "Ow," I whined when it pinched me. "Almost done, Katana," the doctor assured me. When I looked at Nix, I saw he wasn't even breathing as he stared at the top of the doctor's head. He was nervous too. He never said one word about it, but I could read his body language. All the while, his only mission seemed to be trying his best to keep me calm. I had lucked into getting the best baby daddy in the whole world. I had no idea what I'd done to deserve all of this. But I was thankful for it all. I squeezed his hand and he looked at me. "Thanks again for being here for me." He nodded. "Thanks again for including me." He leaned over and kissed my forehead. The doctor finished with the uncomfortable procedure, then pushed something else inside me before flipping a switch on a small screen on his left. We could see the screen too, but I had no idea what we were looking at. He moved the device inside of me as he searched for our baby.
Here we go.
He smiled at us as he pointed to a small orb on the screen. The orb pulsed as the doctor turned up the sound, and there was the tiny heartbeat. A tear fell and I gasped. Nick squeezed my hand and looked at me. So there it is. Our baby, Katana. My heart filled with love. Love for the little orb, and love for Nixon Slaughter. God help me, how can anyone fall in love this quickly?
Chapter 19. Nixon.
A few days had passed since we'd gone to the doctor. I was having lunch with August as our other partner, Gannon, was busy with other things that day. I guessed a 2-year-old could take up a lot of time, but my bet was that it was actually the hot young babysitter that had Gannon Forrester so busy these days. I'd made this vow to myself about telling as few people as possible about the pregnancy, but I couldn't stop myself. So, I'm going to be a little busy myself come the end of July. I put a piece of pepper steak into my mouth as I waited for August to ask me why that was. "That's some time off, Nixon. You have another deal going on or something?" he asked me, then took a long drink of his iced tea. "You remember when I left town for Halloween?" I ran my hand over my beard, remembering how that night had marked the beginning of me growing it out. I'd soon have a much more permanent reminder of that fateful night. "Yeah, I remember you ditching us that night. So, what about it?" He stopped eating to give me his full attention. "You look different, Nixon." "Yeah?" I asked. "How so?" He shrugged. "Not exactly sure about that. You just look a little different. A little happier or something. You must be getting more sleep than you usually do. You have a healthy look going on." I'd had less sleep than usual lately, as Katana and I had spent at least 2 hours of every night since she moved in engaged in some mind-blowing lovemaking. Her bedroom was merely a place for her clothes to be kept. But I had been eating better, spending more time at home with Katana, eating the healthy foods Mona made us, instead of eating out so much. So, the thing that will have me so busy by late July is actually a baby. I stopped, waiting for his reaction, dropping the mic, so to speak. August blinked a few times. "Have you been seeing someone seriously that you've left out of our conversations?" "Well, now I am." I chuckled. "The woman I met on Halloween is pregnant, and it's mine. When she called me and told me she took a test that came back positive, I moved her into my place." Being a wealthy man himself, August was cautious where women were concerned. "Hold on. This woman, have you had her checked out? You can't be sure that baby is yours, not until after it's born and you can have a paternity test done. Don't you think that moving her in with you is jumping the gun by a whole hell of a lot?" He shook his head. "It's not like you to do something stupid like this." "No, it's not." I fidgeted in my seat, as it never sat right with me when anyone thought I was making a mistake. "And I will have a test done after the baby's born. But I don't want to miss out on a thing if the kid is mine. Which I do think it is. This woman has given me no reason to believe she's a liar." "And what does this woman do for a living?" August asked as he put his hands behind his head and leaned back, as if he was my therapist getting ready for one long session. "She's a book cover designer. She freelances and works from home." I winked at him. "Pretty cool, right?" He finally smiled and sat upright. "Thank God. I was pretty sure you were going to tell me she's a stripper." "Damn, August." I laughed, and so did he. "I'll have to introduce you to her soon. You'll see, she's genuine. And I must admit, I'm starting to fall pretty hard for her." I shoved my hand into my pocket and looked down. "She sure is making me think a lot." "Uh-oh." August shook his head at me. "Now, why would that be considered an uh-oh? Care to add to that, August?" I asked him as I picked up my iced tea and took a sip. "You wouldn't do anything stupid, right?" he asked, then tapped the tabletop with his finger. "Like marry her on a spur-of-the-moment kind of thing, without having a prenup, right?" "A prenup?" I asked, then shook my head. "Why would I need one of those things? I don't believe in divorce. My parents raised me right, August." "But did hers?" He winked at me and wagged his finger at me. "You aren't the only one who can file for a thing like a divorce, Nixon. She could too. And she could take you for half of everything you've got." His question about her upbringing did send a red flag floating through my brain. She was raised in foster care. She didn't know her father, and her mother abandoned her. "Damn," he murmured. "That sounds like one hell of a rough life. My heart goes out to the poor thing. That said, now you really need a prenup. She's what I like to call a wild card. You have no clue what she might turn into. When you know a person's family, you can get a rough idea of what the person is like and will be like later on in life. You've heard the saying, look at her mother to see how she'll be in 20 years, right? And her mother is a lowlife, I mumbled. The thought wasn't pretty, nor was the vision that appeared in my head of Katana turning into her absentee mother. Damn. Look, don't rush into anything. Just because she's pregnant, that's no reason to go faster than you would with anyone else. He waved the waiter over. Can you bring the bill? The waiter gave him a nod and headed off. August's words hit me like a punch to the gut. How could I have forgotten about Katana's horrible past? Something like that had to really mess with a person's head. And Katana did have a certain vulnerability about her. Sometimes vulnerability could lead to weakness, and that could lead to self-destructive tendencies. Those were the kinds of things that can end relationships. Maybe I was moving too fast, thinking too much about making things permanent much too quickly. But even as I thought about that, my heart beat harder, as if it were trying to pump more blood to my brain. It reminded of how my pulse had kicked when I looked into her pretty eyes, as we listened to the first sounds we'd ever heard of our baby. That was real. All the what-ifs were not. There could be a billion what-ifs. What if she did turn out like her mother? What if she did turn into some self-destructive person, bent on ruining me? There was just no end to them. But then I began to think about my own what-ifs. What if I never made a commitment to her? What if I lost her to another man who would give her the stability I knew she'd craved her whole life? What if I lost her only because I was too worried about what-ifs? My thoughts were consuming me as August paid the bill. He interrupted my internal battle as he asked, "How about Friday? You still going out?" I shook my head. No. There's no point. I promised Katana I wouldn't see anyone else. His eyes went wide with what looked like shock. Damn. Are you kidding me, man? You've already made a promise like that to her. You barely know this chick, Nixon. Damn, does she have some voodoo shit on you or something? This is so unlike you. She's pregnant with my child, I said, wanting him to understand what I was doing. She told me she wouldn't see anyone, and I told her the same. I also told her that it wasn't a thing that was set in stone. Again, you're making some pretty big decisions based on the assumption that this baby is yours, he pointed out as we got up and started heading for the door. And what about me? The doorman opened the door, letting us out, and we walked into the cool afternoon. A slight breeze stirred my hair and I ran my hand through it. What about you? I had to ask. I don't want to hit the town all alone. Gannon already called and he's backed out on us. And now you too. He shook his head as we headed for our cars. We have a nightclub to put together. That is one of the main reasons we hit the town on Friday nights, if you'll recall. To get ideas about what people like, what they flock to. We stopped at his BMW, and I had to tell him something I'd been thinking about for a while anyway. We're not making a club for everyday people. We're making one for the super rich. And that means our clientele won't have the same desires as the people who go to the clubs that are already here. Our clients will be looking for sophistication, style, and ways to rub elbows with other people with money who can help them further expand their businesses. All he could do was nod. But he still wore a frown. I guess you're right. When we came up with that grand plan, we were all single and free. And we were all looking for a good time. Well, my good time is waiting for me at home. And although Gannon has yet to come clean with us, his good time is also at home. Those clubbing days are most likely a thing of the past for the two of us. I watched August's expression grow grim. I hope that doesn't upset you, man. With a shake of his head, he opened the driver's side door and looked at me. You guys are growing up on me. I guess we were. And it was long overdue.
Chapter 20. Katana.
The afternoon had a cool, gentle breeze blowing in off the ocean water, bringing with it a wonderful scent. I sat on the deck, getting some vitamin D from the sun and enjoying the gorgeous day. Nix had had lunch with one of his business partners, then he said he'd be home after that. I loved the fact that I had someone coming home to me every day. It was so different from my life before. A man cleared his throat, taking my attention away from my thoughts, and I pulled my shades down to see who it was. A tall man stood on the stairs looking at me. "Hi there. You're a new addition to this neighborhood." He gestured to the deck.
May I?
"Of course," I said, sitting up and making sure my dress was straight. I'd been lounging and had no idea what kind of state I was in. "I'm Katana Reeves." He came to me and shook my hand. "John Simmons. I live next door." "You related to Nixon?" No, I'm not." I didn't know how much to tell the man. "Oh, okay." He pointed to the other chair. "You mind?" "No, please sit down." I pointed to the unopened bottle of water on the small table between us.
Thirsty?
He shook his head. "Nah." "So where are you from, Katana Reeves?" "Portland," I told him. "But now I live here." He nodded and ran his hand through his thick, dark, wavy hair. "And why's that?" I found him quite nosy, but I supposed neighbors liked to know who was living next to them. "Well, if you must know, I'm pregnant with Nixon's baby." "Oh," he said with raised brows. "Now that's some news." "Are you a reporter?" I joked with him. "No," he said with a chuckle. "Just a nosy old man with little to do." "You're not old," I said as I looked him over. He wasn't super young, but he wasn't old either. "How old do you think I am?" he asked with a smile.
And don't sugarcoat it.
"I really want to know how old I look to you." 40, I said without thinking too much about it. He nodded. 42. But I feel much older than that. I guess going through a divorce does that to people. I'm sorry to hear that. How long ago was it? A little stab in my heart had me asking. It's nearly been a year since it became finalized. But it took 2 years to get the whole ugly thing done. He ran his hand over his brow. I waited too long to leave my wife. I stayed for our 2 kids. I spent 20 years with the woman I thought loved me. Some 6 years back I caught her cheating, and only then did I find out she'd been doing it all along. I even had to get my kids tested to make sure they were mine. They were, so I stayed. I stayed and stayed until our youngest graduated from high school and moved off to college. Then I left, and that woman who'd done me so wrong tried to do even more to me. She wanted half of everything. So it took a long time to get the divorce finalized. My lawyer had to fight hers just so I could come out losing only a quarter of what I had, instead of half. That sounds awful, I said as I shook my head. It was. He nodded. Then he pulled his shades down and looked at me over the top of them. So you and Nixon, had you known each other long before this happened? I felt embarrassment heat my cheeks. No. Not at all. He clucked his tongue and shook his head. Damn. Yeah, well, it is what it is. I didn't know what else to say. And your plan is what exactly? He asked as he slid his sunglasses back up his nose. To live together, and have the baby and let life take us wherever it takes us. I sighed, knowing that sounded like a flighty plan. Oh, one of those kinds of plans. Got ya. He laughed and slapped his denim-covered leg. I don't envy you guys, I can tell you that. Although I was slightly offended by the blunt man, I found myself asking, and why is that exactly, John? Well, my wife and I had a plan, and even that didn't make things work out for us. He sighed, and I could feel his sadness about how his marriage had turned out. We started our marriage out of love, not merely because she was pregnant. The odds are stacked against you two. I'm not worried about any relationship between Nix and me. What worries me the most is how our child will be affected by both of us. That's all that really matters. I believe Nix and I have the baby's best interest as our focus. I leaned back, feeling great about what I'd said. John just laughed again.
Oh, honey.
Oh, honey? I shook my head. What does that mean? It means you're living in a fantasy world. That's what it means. He smiled at me as if what he was saying should make me feel better, which it didn't. And I had been feeling pretty damn sure about everything before he'd arrived. Especially since the doctor's appointment and that special moment Nix and I had shared, where I had felt my heart open up to him. Sure, I hadn't gone so far as to let Nix know about that little miracle, but I would. One day. Time had to pass, or he'd think I was telling him I loved him much too soon. I couldn't have that. So I'd keep it to myself for now. But this guy, this virtual stranger, had just told me I was living in a fantasy world, and he didn't even know the half of it. So I enlightened him. I don't think I am living in a fantasy world. Well, that's not entirely true. You see this place, this home, the man who comes home to me each day, now that is just like a fantasy. And not one I'd ever had before. I hadn't meant for any of this to happen, and for things to have fallen into place so easily is a gift. Nix is a gift. John smiled. Now that's a pretty sweet sentiment. So, you like this guy a lot then? I nodded. I love him. I couldn't believe I had just admitted something so huge to this man. A man I didn't know from Adam. And I think he'll grow to love me. I think he and I can make a fantastic family together. John's brows shot up. Oh. I don't suppose, since you're from Portland, that you know much about the man you're living with. Not a lot about his past. But I'm getting to know him more and more with each passing day, and he's a good man. A man I respect immensely. I picked up the bottle of water and took a drink of it, as my impassioned bits of speech had made my mouth dry. A cluck of his tongue told me John wanted to fill me in on something. Well, you should know the man has quite the eye for beautiful women. And he's never kept any of them around for long periods of time. Being his neighbor, I can tell you why that is. Would you like to know? I did and I didn't. What did it matter how he'd been with other women in the past? But that damn curiosity raised her ugly head and used my mouth to say, yes, I would love to know why. I'm assuming it's because you think he's quite the player. When John shook his head, I had to admit I was surprised. Nope. I mean, he's been with a boatload of women, but I don't think it was by choice necessarily. You see, Nixon Slaughter is easily distracted, and not by other women but by business. His downfall is that he's neglectful of people. I've seen him out on this very deck with beautiful woman after beautiful woman, and I've watched him get phone call after phone call, and end up leaving them all alone on his deck with a perfect view. And I watched as he forgot he had a woman waiting for his return at all, sometimes even leaving her to go somewhere else without giving so much as a goodbye. It didn't seem that he could possibly be talking about the man I knew. Are you sure you're talking about the man who lives here? Because the man I know isn't neglectful in the least. Maybe the baby has something to do with that right now, John offered. But I do believe his natural ways will kick in sooner or later. And where will that leave you, Katana? Here, home alone with a baby and no one to help you with it? I don't think. I tried to say. John shook his head. I know you don't think he'll be that way with you or with this child, he said. I've been around the block a time or two. I've lived next door to this man for nearly 3 years. I've seen him. I know him. You don't. He's high on the fact he's about to be a father for the first time. The man is almost 30, and probably didn't even know himself how ready he was to be a father. Even men yearn to have children at a certain age. Maybe it's the baby that's changing him. Maybe that is true. But I think it's a change that will stick. I have faith in that, I said, then looked over my shoulder when I heard the familiar beep of the security system that signaled someone's arrival. I'll have to say goodbye and nice meeting you, John. He seems to be home now. John got up and waved as he headed down the stairs. See you around, Katana. When I got inside, I found Nix coming in through the kitchen, having come through the garage after parking his car. His smile was the first thing I noticed, and then his arms were around me, holding me close as our mouths met in the sweet kiss we always shared when he came home. I loved the little ritual. But I couldn't help feeling a little uncertain after the conversation I'd just had. John's words about Nix's past had me a little worried about admitting my love for the man too quickly. I couldn't stay in a neglectful situation again. No child deserved that, and neither did I. It was a total deal-breaker in my book.
Chapter 21. Nixon.
Each day that passed had us growing closer. Katana and I talked more than I'd ever talked to anyone about anything, even in my business life. With only a few days until Christmas, I found myself doing things without thinking about them at all, having settled into our own little routine. After watching a movie downstairs, I turned off the television and got off the sofa. Time for bed, baby. A little smile curved her lips as she took my hand and let me pull her up, and she moved right into my arms. I'm feeling a little feisty tonight, master. She pulled my hand down to cup her butt. Maybe a little punishment will calm me down. I can see the healthy diet I've been making you eat has gotten you back in good shape. Maybe we can play a little. I scooped her up and took her up the stairs to my bedroom, which had quickly become our bedroom in my mind. You know, you should just let me move your things into this bedroom. I sat her on my bed and loved how she lit up at the idea. Like, make this thing a bit more real? She asked. Is that something you'd like? I asked her. I'd love nothing more than to make things more real between us. I'll move my things tomorrow if you'd like. Nothing would make me happier. While there was at least one thing that would make me happier, I wasn't about to mess up my Christmas surprise. I had no idea how she did this to me. The woman consumed my thoughts. I found myself stopping everything I was doing throughout my busy workdays just to call her and hear her voice. Without even trying, the woman had me in the palm of her hand. And what was even crazier was that she had no clue as to how much she had me. But even if she did come to realize it someday, I didn't see her ever using her hold over me in any kind of bad way. Yeah, I was waiting for a client to show up at my office earlier today and was looking for something to read. I found this novel on my Kindle and scanned it for the steamy scenes. That's where I got the idea. Glad you liked it. I was pretty proud of myself for taking the time to research new ways to please my lady. How thoughtful of you, Nix. She turned on her side to face me. Her lips touched my nose. You know, I think you're just about the most thoughtful man I've ever met. I haven't always been that, Katana. It's funny how you affect me. You've changed me without even trying to. I kissed her on the forehead. I mean, I never knew I could be like this. The truth is, my business has consumed me for years. Before that, it was sports. I've never been the kind of guy who thought much at all about the woman I was with at any given time. But you, somehow you've taken over everything. It's you who consumes my thoughts now. I hope it stays that way. You consume my thoughts as well, you know. She ran her hand over my chest, tracing my tribal tattoo. My life has gone from one of mere contentment to one I'd never have even dared to dream about. Thank you, Nixon Slaughter. No, thank you, Katana Reeves. I pulled her closer to me, holding her tight. I thank God every single day for taking me to you that Halloween night. I'll never forget that night. Even if we hadn't had a permanent reminder on the way, I would never forget the night I'd found Katana and changed into the person I was meant to be.
Chapter 22. Katana.
Christmas Eve arrived and Nix came home with a real Christmas tree. I met him at the door as he told me he had a surprise. Wow, a real one, huh? I asked as he pulled it through the door, pine needles leaving a trail in its wake. Always a real one, baby. He leaned it against the wall and came to me, pulling me into his arms and giving me his usual hello kiss. This is a tradition in my family. We don't put up a tree until Christmas Eve, and we take it down the day after New Year's. Why wait so late before you put it up, Nix? I asked as I ran my hand over the tree, finding it somewhat sticky and prickly. Nix went to the closet under the stairs and pulled out a box that had Christmas written on it. He came to the tree and sat it on the floor. Well, my family is big, I told you about that. And with a lot of kids, Mom and Dad found out a lot of begging and pleading to open just one present got to be annoying. I can imagine, I said as I helped him take the things out of the box and laid them on the coffee table to sort them out. So they came up with the idea of only putting the tree up on Christmas Eve, and we each got to open one present that night. The next morning we'd open the rest, giving Santa a chance to bring us more presents and fill our stockings with candy and little toys. His eyes lit up as he pulled out the tree topper, an old star with hardly any silver glitter remaining. This came from my Gram's Christmas ornament collection. I got this out of a box full of them after she passed away. With a nod, I understood why he had the ugly old thing. I see. What a sweet sentiment. I began to notice that all the ornaments looked old and worn out. Did you inherit all of these? I did. He stopped pulling things out of the box to pull something out of his jacket pocket. But I'll be adding something new this year. It's the first ornament I've actually purchased. A small brown bag was in his hand, and he handed it to me. What is it? I asked. The bag was flat, almost as if nothing was inside of it. Open it. His smile went wide as he watched me. I opened the flap that closed the bag and found clear plastic inside. Pulling it out, I found a brass baby booty inside and pulled it out too. He'd had it engraved with the words, "Daddy and Mommy's first Christmas with their little orb." Tears clouded my vision as I thought that it had to be the sweetest thing he'd ever done in his entire life. I threw myself into his arms for a hug and tried to hold back the tears, but just couldn't. Nix, you're the sweetest man on the planet. Ah, it's just a little something to help us remember our first Christmas together. He looked down at the ornament I held and took it from me, placing it on the table with the rest of the things. So first we have to put this thing in a tree stand, and that's no easy task. I'd never had a real tree before. My foster parents had had this little plastic tree they'd put up each year. It went up right after Thanksgiving and didn't come down until sometime after the New Year. And we never got to decorate it. Mrs. Davis did that alone. All I'd ever gotten was one present each year. I was thankful for that. And it was always something useful, never a toy. I didn't ever have any toys that I could recall. But I'd make damn sure my kid had a ton of them. I nearly forgot, Nick said. As he snapped his head up, he wore a grin. Can you go out to my car? It's parked in the front. Somebody left something for you inside. It's sitting on the passenger seat. For me? I asked, surprised. I made my way to his car and opened the passenger door to find a small box and a red envelope. Who's this from, I wonder? I thought it had to be a small early present from Nix, but when I opened the card I found it was from Shanna. The envelope housed a Christmas card with a lighted tree on front that wished me a Merry Xmas. When I opened it, I found she'd written me a note inside. The first line hooked me. To the woman who's stolen my best friend's heart. I had to read it all now. How could I not? Nixon Slaughter has been like a big brother to me since I can remember. So I might come off kind of overprotective of the man now and then. That said, I can see that he looks at you with love-glazed eyes. And that makes me happy. I'm sorry for my prejudice about what you two enjoy. I know, not your typical Christmas card material. Anyway, please forgive me for jumping to conclusions about you. I don't know you well yet, but you're my best friend's girl, so that means we will become great friends too. Now open the present I gave Nixon to gift to you, and we will consider this hatchet buried. My heart felt full of emotion as I put the card away, making sure to put it up nice and neat as I'd keep it forever. I felt it was such a sweet sentiment and would treasure the card. When I opened the small black box, I found a bracelet inside. It had a sterling silver charm bracelet, and there were a few charms on it already. One of the charms stood out amongst them all. One in the shape of a heart that said Friends for Life on one side, and on the other she'd had our names engraved. I took my present and card inside and found one tear had fallen. Nix looked at me as I came inside, and his smile beamed at me. Do I see a tear? I wiped my eye with the back of my hand. I'm afraid so. I think I've made a new friend. He nodded and went back to pulling decorations out of the boxes. Good. That girl's like a sister to me. She's a little on the tomboy side and doesn't like to hang with girls much. She's kind of rough and tumble. That's how come she and I ended up becoming such good friends. I never want you to be jealous of her. There's no reason to. I hope you can look at her like you'll look at any of my family, because she's as close to me as they are. I came up behind him, hugging him. I think she made a great gesture, and I will accept her for who she is. I'm just so happy we can all get along. I don't want to spoil one thing in our life. I only want to enhance it. He turned around, wrapping his arms around me. A sweet kiss told me he was happy with things, and that always seemed to make me happy. I knew the odds were stacked against us. I knew most people thought we'd never make it. But with that against us, I still wanted to see if we could beat those odds. I wondered if Nix thought that way too. Mona was in the kitchen, making us something for a special Christmas Eve dinner. I told her in secret that I wanted her to take the entire day of Christmas off. I'd been gathering recipes from the internet and watching cooking videos all week long. I'd even made a trip to the store to buy all the ingredients I'd need to make Nix a proper Christmas dinner of ham, sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, and homemade rolls. Nix and I managed to get the tree into its stand, and were taking our time placing the ornaments on the tree. Nix told me where each and every one of them came from. His family was huge, and I had to admit that I was intimidated about meeting them all. How am I going to remember all of their names, babe? I asked as I placed a pale blue satin ball on the tree. It had a large yellow stain on it, and he told me that was from when it had fallen in a glass of his Aunt Rose's iced tea as she took the ornaments down on her very last Christmas. You shouldn't worry about that. He kissed the tip of my nose. Half the time, my mother can't even remember her own kids' names. She'll go through the gambit of family names, then end up shouting, "You know who you are and why I'm calling you, damn it." I laughed as he tickled my ribs. Nix? I wiggled to get away from him. You're gonna make me pee. He stopped and pulled me in for a kiss. As our tongues twirled, I thought I'd never had such a memorable Christmas. He'd brought things to my life I'd had no idea I'd been missing. Mona popped out of the kitchen. The formal dining room awaits your arrival, you two. And I'll be on my way. You can just toss the dishes in the dishwasher when you're done. I'll tend to them when I come back. Nix took my hand as I called out, "Thank you, Mona. You have a Merry Christmas." You too. Bye now, Mona called back just before she slipped out the garage door. A small squeeze to my hand had me looking at Nix to find his green eyes sparkling at me. Have I told you that you look beautiful tonight? A blush stained my cheeks. He made me feel so out of sorts when he looked at me that way and said things like that to me. No, you haven't said a thing about that. I ducked my head shyly. He lifted it with one finger and kissed me softly. You're very beautiful all the time, but tonight even more so somehow. You're very handsome tonight too. I ran my hand over his light green sweater. This brings out the color of your eyes. I'd put on a red dress in honor of the occasion. He ran his fingers over my shoulder. Red always looks good on you. We made our way to the formal dining room, and there we found candles lighting up a gorgeous table that looked like something out of a magazine. 2 gold domes covered our plates, and sparkling water glistened in wine glasses next to them. Mona is amazing, I whispered. How can I ever top this when I make the meal for Christmas? But all that worry went out of my head as Nix helped me into a chair and took the one at the head of the table. We sat there, looking at everything, and then he took my hand. You know, back home, my daddy says a prayer before we eat on special occasions. I suppose as we'll be parents from now on, we should start doing that too. I shook my head. I don't know any prayers. You go for it. He bowed his head, and so did I as he said, "Our Father in heaven, please bless this food that we're so thankful for. And please bless our little baby that we're also thankful for." He stopped and cleared his throat. "And bless this woman at my side as she's made this all possible. Without her, I'd be lost. Amen." When I looked up at him, I saw unshed tears shimmering in his eyes. I ran my hand over his beard. "You'd be lost?" He nodded and leaned over to kiss me. "You're my hero." I gulped and tried not to start bawling. "You're mine." He kissed me again, and I felt like I was floating on air. Would this be the right time to admit my love for him? But when his lips left mine, he pulled the dome off his plate and smiled. Wow, she really outdid herself. Roasted game hens, mashed potatoes and brown gravy, peas with pearl onions. Yum. I pulled the dome off mine and enjoyed the aromas that drifted up to me. "It smells wonderful, doesn't it?" "It does." He dug right in, and I followed suit. The moment had passed, and now it would be awkward to say the words to him. How did one say something like that, especially for the first time, when the recipient of the sentiment was feasting on delicious food and savoring every bite? Maybe I'd tell him on Christmas. Maybe that would be the perfect time to let him know that I loved him.
Chapter 23. Nixon.
After the delicious dinner on Christmas Eve, Katana refused to just leave the dirty dishes in the dishwasher. She cleaned up the dining room and did all the dishes, and even went so far as to put them all away. While she did that, I took a glass of wine out to the deck to look at the stars. The sound of footsteps coming up the stairs had me turning my eyes from the sky to find my neighbor John, trotting up to visit me. "Hey John. Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas to you too, Nixon." He took a seat on one of the deck chairs and pulled a bottle of beer out of his jacket pocket. "I saw you out here and thought I'd join you for a little drink." I raised my glass of wine in a toast to him, and he did the same with his beer. "Two new beginnings," I said. "Here, here," he said, then popped the bottle's top and took a drink. "Did Katana tell you I met her the other day?" "She did," I told him, then set my glass down. His expression turned sheepish. "Did she rat me out?" I froze for a second as I wondered what the hell he meant. What had he done? She hadn't said a word about him saying anything that would have him asking me a question like that. "No. But I'd love it if you told on yourself." "Yeah, well," he seemed hesitant. "After I got back home, I thought about what I'd said, and it sunk in that I might have said things that might have put her off about you." "Well, if Katana's put off about me, she's not showing it." I laughed and picked up my glass, taking a drink. At least whatever he'd said hadn't affected her. Good. I can be a motormouth sometimes, and talking to her proved to be one of those times. He took a long drink of his beer before he went on. "You see, I pointed out how you are, or were anyway. I told her that you could be very neglectful of people. Especially women." "Oh, that. I was well aware of that major downfall. Well, I'm not that person when I'm with her. She makes me a better person. I don't know how she does it. She doesn't ask me to be any certain way. I just want to be around her, with her, or at least talking to her throughout the day when I can't be with her. She's what I think about most of the time. And there's the baby now too. She told me about that. And how that's why she's here with you, so you guys can raise it together." He took another drink. "You know about my divorce and how I'd never get married again. Plus, if I could have a do-over, I'd leave the kids out of it. Now come on, John. You've whined a lot about the divorce and how your wife cheated, but how can you second-guess your children? That's just going too far. There are no mistakes in bringing a child into this world. I believe that with everything in me." I knew I'd gotten up on my soapbox a bit as I was talking a little louder than normal, but he had to stop beating himself up over this thing. "They have some issues because of what they went through, Nixon. I don't always let that be known. Sandy has trouble trusting people. And Brady is a womanizer. Both drink too much." John shook his head. If I would have known they would end up with problems, then I might have left sooner and just taken them with me. As if you could have done that, I said as I ran my hand through my hair. The wind had kicked up and mussed it up a bit. In this day and age, you could have never gotten complete custody of them. I didn't mean like legitimately take them. I meant run off with them. Escape from the woman who ruined all of our lives. Rescue them. He took another drink, looking like a man who had too many regrets. I doubt your kids are that messed up. I've seen them. As a matter of fact, are they going to be stopping by to visit you tomorrow for Christmas? I asked to try to get him off his pity party and on to something better. Yeah, he said, then finished his beer. After they stopped by their mother's place. She's got a new man, poor son of a gun. They're having a real old-fashioned Christmas with his 3 kids as well. I guess she's pretending she has a big happy family with love just flowing in the air now that she's rid of me. It was wrong of me to do, and I knew it even as the chuckle left my mouth. Sorry. I really am. I know you've had it rough, but listen to yourself. She didn't get rid of you. You left her. And you did what you thought you needed to do for your kids, and that's admirable. You did the best you could with what you ended up with. Now don't you think it's time to move on? John looked at me with a frown. No. I don't want to move on. And I didn't come over to talk about me, anyways. I wanted to come over here to talk to you about your upcoming bundle of joy. Don't make Katana think you'll be there for her through the raising of this child. We both know you'll get busy with some new and exciting project, and she and this kid will be left alone, waiting for your attention to return to them. Which it won't. It won't because men like you are driven. I was slightly incensed that the man thought he knew me better than I knew myself. Driven isn't a bad thing to be. Look at where it's gotten me, I said, gesturing around my deck. And as far as how I was, that doesn't matter. I want Katana and this baby. I've already put her and this baby ahead of everything else. And I happen to have a project on the table right now. We're going to open the nightclub Swank on New Year's Eve. And I haven't lost sight of her as I've been moving forward with that project. Maybe that's because she and this baby have become your new project. You were already working on that nightclub when you met her. His words sent my heart into a spiral. He was absolutely right. I had already been working on the nightclub for months. John did know me well. I always had a project in mind before finishing the one I was on at the time. My mind just worked that way. Even when I'd been a kid playing sports, I'd be near the end of football season, and already I'd be messing around, playing basketball, and getting ready for that season. I was the kind of person who always looked for the next thing. Would I do that to Katana? Would I do that to my own kid? I can see your wheels turning, Nixon. I hope you're not mad at me. But having a kid is a big deal. He stopped as I waved my hand at him to get him to quit talking. I'm not mad. I know you think a lot about kids and what happens to them if their family life is sucky. And I know you don't mean any harm. I gulped down the rest of my wine as I tried to wrap my head around everything. I don't mean any harm to anyone. But you need to be realistic about the girl and that kid you've got coming. He got up and tossed his beer bottle into the small trash bin at the top of the stairs. You're a great guy, Nixon. I don't want you to think I think anything else. But you're a driven man, and men like you make lousy husbands and fathers. People get left behind by men like you. Just don't lead this girl into thinking you can be something you're not. Let her do what she needs to with this baby. And with that, he left me. Alone now, I sat there thinking about who I really was. I knew I'd never turn my back on Katana or our child. She'd always have everything she'd ever need to take care of our kid. Always. But was I putting Katana in a position where she'd be hurt and alone when I moved on to my next project? When I looked up, the stars seemed to blur and spin. My life had just started to resemble the world I'd always dreamed of having. I'd never been home so much and been so happy to leave the office behind. But it wasn't just about coming home to my Malibu beach house it was Katana. I'd always been a bit more than merely content with my life. But I'd never been as happy as I'd been since Katana came into my life. Since the night we met, I'd had a thing for her that wouldn't quit. So there was only one real question. Was this real? Were my feelings real, or just the typical excitement I always got when starting a new project? Katana didn't feel like a project to me. I wasn't trying to mold her or shape her into what I wanted her to be. That's what I did with projects. I built things, changed things, rearranged things. I didn't stop until I was completely satisfied with what I'd done. I didn't look at her and think she'd look better with blonde hair. I didn't think she should change the style of her clothes. I didn't think she needed to have a different job. I didn't want to change a thing about the woman. Well, there was one thing I wanted to change about her. So I guess I was only lying to myself.
Chapter 24. Katana. Christmas Day.
On Christmas morning, I woke up alone in bed. After stretching, yawning, and trying to wake my sleepy self up, I sat up and called out, "Nix?" No one answered, and I got up to take a shower and get myself all prettied up for the day. Our first Christmas. I'd put the presents I'd bought him under the tree last night, and he'd put some for me under there too. And I thought it was pretty sweet that we'd each bought something for our baby too, and put those under there. There was a bigger stack of presents under my very first tree than I'd ever had growing up. Everything was better with Nix. As I showered, I noticed there was some expensive new shampoo and conditioner in there, and Nix had drawn hearts on the bottles and written, "Just for you," on them. I lathered up my hair with the minty shampoo that had my head tingling, and I thought about what a treasure the man was. I'd take that man even if he didn't have a dime. I'd live in a treehouse with the man. I didn't care. I knew I'd been lucky he'd found me in that club that night. After getting myself as pretty as I could, I pulled on the red dress I'd bought just for this day. It fit tight at the top and all the way to my still narrow waist, which I knew I'd lose soon enough. The dress flared out at the waist, making it look like I had a petticoat underneath it. The fabric came to just below my knees, and when I added the flats, as Nix told me he never wanted to see me in heels while I was pregnant or he'd give me a real spanking, my legs looked long and slender. I felt pretty, and I couldn't wait to find Nix. I wasn't going to let this day pass without telling him how I really felt about him. When I walked out the bedroom door, I found something littering the floor. The white rose petals stood out, contrasting against the dark stone tiles. It looked as if he'd placed each one just the way he wanted it. What's this about? I had to wonder what the man had up his sleeve. With him, I just didn't know what he was up to. A thought hit me and I stopped. What if he's bought me an expensive car? Trying to steady myself for the shock of that, I thought about how scared I'd be to drive something so expensive. I'd only ever had old pieces of barely held together crap. Could I pull off being excited instead of afraid? Moving on, I shook off the nerves and got to the top of the stairs. The rose petals went all the way down the stairs, and on the floor at the very bottom, the entire floor was covered in a circular pattern. It looked as if something was missing from that circle, and I had to wonder what that could be. Okay, maybe he hadn't bought me a car. Maybe it was a really large gift, and he hadn't gotten it inside yet to put it there. Should I go back and wait a few more minutes? As I stood there thinking about what I should do, I noticed something else. 2 suitcases were sitting by the door. Now why in the world would those be there? Was he surprising me with a trip of some kind? I had absolutely no clue what he was up to, and had no idea if I should turn back to wait or not. I didn't want to mess up his big surprise when he'd gone to so much trouble. No one had ever done anything nearly as grand as all this. I looked over my shoulder, wondering if I should go back to the bedroom to grab my cell so I could take a picture. I wanted to remember this scene forever. Just as I turned around, I heard a noise. The sound of rustling met my ears and I turned to see what it was. Down on one knee and wearing a black tuxedo, Nix held out a box. The stone in the ring was so big, I could see it all the way from the top of the stairs. His green eyes met mine as he gazed up at me. I took each step one at a time, slowly, so I could take him all in. The way he smiled up at me. The way his eyes sparkled. His clean-shaven face, bare of the beard I'd gotten so used to. The cute dimple that I could now see he only had in his left cheek. I could barely breathe. He was about to propose to me, and I knew damn good and well what my answer would be. Some people might think it was too fast, but I knew I loved the man and was positive there was no other one out there in the world for me. Nixon Slaughter was it. He waited so patiently for me to get to him. When I did, he finally spoke. "You look beyond beautiful, baby." I was close to crying, but I managed to say, "You too." I ran my hands over my own cheeks. "You shaved?" He nodded. "Yeah, I wanted the pictures to be nice." So he planned on taking some more pictures. The man would make sure we had something to remember all of our pivotal moments. He was perfect that way. Today would be the day we got engaged and celebrated our first Christmas. One day, there would be a wedding. One day, there would be the birth of our child. "I'm sure they will be nice, Nix." I smiled at him, and loved the way his dark hair was so nicely combed, parted on one side, making him even more handsome. "I'd like to ask you a question," he said. "Is that okay with you?" I nodded. "Yes." "Good, I've gotten my first yes, now I'll shoot for more." He chuckled, and his eyes shone with amusement. "Katana Grace Reeves." He stopped and winked at me. "I snooped in your purse last night and found your driver's license. That's how I know your middle name." "I see." I laughed lightly. "Please go on." He cleared his throat before he moved on. "Katana Grace Reeves, I love you." My heart pounded, and I felt the first tear break free. "I've been a fool for you since the night we met. A night I know neither of us will ever forget. I'm not asking you this just because you're carrying our baby. I'm asking you this because I don't want to think of a life that doesn't have you in it, right by my side, until death do us part. And I mean that. So I'm asking you if you love me too, and if you'll become my wife. Today. In Las Vegas. Today." I swayed a bit, feeling like I'd been knocked back. Not only did he want to marry me, but he wanted to do it right now. My mouth went dry. My head spun. And my heart lurched in my chest. Tears poured down like rain as my lips parted. "I love you, Nixon Slaughter. Nothing would make me happier than marrying you today." His smile got even wider as he stood up and slipped that huge diamond engagement ring onto my finger. "Thank you, baby. I promise you'll never regret your answer." When his arms slid around me, bringing me to him so our lips could touch, I knew I'd made the right decision. Where Nixon was concerned, every decision I'd made had been the right one. From taking him up on his offer to leave that club with him on Halloween night, to telling him as soon as I could about the baby, to accepting the invitation to move in with him, everything had been right. This had to be the right thing too. When our mouths parted, we were both panting. "I take you upstairs and make sweet love to you, Katana, but we have these presents to open and a private jet to get to." I took the liberty of booking us a bridal suite already. I didn't want to take any chances. We slowed down a bit and opened the presents we'd given each other. He gave me more expensive jewelry, and then there was one more small box. When I opened it, I found a set of keys with the Mercedes emblem on them. "Nix? You look a little shocked, baby," he said with a laugh. "You know my wife can't be driving around in a clunker. I do have standards to keep, you know." I shook my head as I put the keys down. I picked up the special present I'd gotten him and handed it to him. "Thank you for the car and all the jewelry, among the other things you've given me. Open this one next." He smiled the entire time he opened that package, and when he found the simple paperweight I'd given him, he laughed. "And I love you, paperweight? Well, I had no idea you were going to do all this. And I wanted to tell you that I loved you today. You kind of stole my thunder there with the marriage proposal, but I wanted you to know that I was going to declare my love for you today anyway." I knew it the day we heard our baby's heart beating. I wrapped my arms around his neck and kissed him. We just kept on having one perfect day after another. I was no fool. I knew some days wouldn't be all wine and roses, but I had a feeling there'd be more good days than bad ones. A few hours later, he and I stood in front of a preacher who looked a hell of a lot like Elvis as soft music played in a tiny chapel in Vegas. I'd never dreamt about having a wedding, but this surpassed anything I could have ever come up with. When our lips met as husband and wife for the first time, I knew we'd beat all the odds and make a marriage and family we both could be proud of. Nix and I had found our happily ever after. I had no doubts about that.
The end. Thank you for listening to this audiobook. Audio copyright 2023, BFA Publishing. Please like and subscribe to support this channel, it helps more than you know.